We're live. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right, well, welcome everybody to the Standards and Assessment Committee, June 7th, 2024. So if we've ever announced the date, but there it is. We're going to start with the information items for recognition of progress, achievements, and improvements. And I will pass that to Patty, Superintendent Norman, if she's ready.
Yes. Okay, today we would like to recognize some work that is being done in A2A. So I'll start with the Utah State Board of Education's mission is to open doors of opportunity for all Utah children. This month, we highlight the work of the Assessment to Achievement. You'll hear it as A2A leadership team in creating systemic change through high quality professional learning and rigorous on-site coaching across Utah by strengthening how educators improve student outcomes with evidence-based instruction, collaboration, and data use. And there is quite a list of schools. You'll see in backup if anyone online wants to look at it. But there are quite a few schools, and I'm going to list them because there's been so much work that is done. We have Beehive Science and Technology Academy Elementary School. Beehive Science
is perhaps the most famous river cruise brand out there. Just recently.
Can we hear that more?
River Cruise. I need to go. Falcon Ridge Elementary School, San Rafael Middle School, Uinta River High School, the Center for Creativity, Innovation, and Discovery, Mountain Heights Academy, Spectrum Academy, Westland Elementary School, Guadalupe School, Pinnacle Canyon Academy, Utah International Charter, Bastion Elementary School, Advantage Arts Academy, Athos Academy, Highmark Charter School, American Academy of Innovation, and Hawthorne Academy, South Jordan. So during the, let me see, do we have the members here? Do we have Rebecca? Okay, we have Katie Bears, Rebecca Hatch, Megan Lopez, and Andrea Mortensen. And I know a few of those couldn't make it today, but if you're online, just do a wave so we can all see who you are. And this is the work. This is how in-depth and it is. During the 2015-16 school year, the first cohort of A2A schools began with the aim of improving student outcomes through professional learning and on-site coaching support. Since then, 119 schools have participated in A2A's 4-year cohort with amazing outcomes. A2A provides professional learning opportunities for administrative and educator leadership teams that cultivate collaborative systems while improving individual educator practice. The A2A project strengthens how educators improve student outcomes with evidence-based instruction, collaboration, and data use. Analysis of summative assessment scores for the first cohort of A2A, so that was the 2015 to 2019 years, found that A2A schools achieved twice the growth in proficiency as compared to non-A2A schools. Schools, I'll say that again, twice the growth in proficiency. Schools that implemented A2A learning comprehensively achieved an average of 12% proficiency gains. Success among participating A2A schools has endured the 6 subsequent cohorts. So it was not an anomaly. It was purposeful and it's lasting. Educators that joined the A2A in 2019 and 2020 received highly flexible and responsive learning experiences as they navigated the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, juggling learning amidst concerns for community health, remote learning, and student absenteeism. Remarkably, 92% of A2A schools engaged during the pandemic achieved a growth indicator score of exemplary, even during the pandemic. By the end of 22-23 school year, and similar to earlier A2A cohorts, each school experienced some level of growth, with certain schools showing significant progress. Special recognition needs to be given to the A2A's executive secretary for the logistical support enabling A2A to come to life. A2A requires supporting approximately 200 participants, maintaining a complex budget, securing professional learning locations for large groups, and managing logistics for all participants and USBE staff involved. Additionally, A2A would not see the success it does without the support of the entire assessment and accountability department. So consistently, A2A helps schools strengthen student outcomes with quarterly professional learning and embedded on-site coaching. The USBE A2A leadership team looks forward to achieving demonstrable gains in student outcomes by providing more frequent and customizable services for participating A2A schools starting in the 2024-2025 school year. So a cohort lasting 4 years, getting twice the growth, even through the pandemic, This is a dedicated team who is really polishing, making sure that what they're doing is very personalized and it is working. So thanks to the board for supporting. When you hear A to A, I hope you now know a little bit more about what it is and what it looks like in our schools. And as you can see, it's the same in community schools. So a huge thank you to that team.
And there they are online.
Oh, there they are.
Yay.
They're little tiny.
Any questions?
All right, well, I think we are ready. And it doesn't look like we have any public comment unless you had anybody. I'm not seeing.
Unless anybody signed in, I didn't have anybody register ahead of time, but we do have a few guests if anybody had anything. Okay.
Sounds good. All right, well, we're gonna move to the first action item on the agenda, 1.3 R277-443, informal science education enhancement, also known as IC, and open it up for discussions or discussion review.
And it was so weird.
Does anybody have anything?
Is there someone that's presenting on this or not really? Or just
Oh,
questions?
if
Is
you
it
have
only
questions,
questions?
if you
Okay,
have
I do have questions. Let me find my cracker sheet here, guys. So June motions. June meeting, there we go. Okay, I have just a couple of questions. So line 49. Let's get down to it. There, it talks about an evaluative tool. It says, so under educational soundness, under there it says show continuous improvement guided by analysis of an evaluative tool. I just am wondering what does that mean?
So Milo Mon,
Yeah.
secondary science education specialist, I help supervise the IC program. So each, I believe in another place in the rule, it talks about that each organization needs to have some type of evaluative tool that they use to evaluate their own program. And so they just need to show that through that evaluative tool that they have exhibit educational sense.
Okay, and I'm just curious, is that based on surveys of attendees to their program, teacher feedback,
It's what.
all of the above? I see.
It's what they decide that evaluate to. So
Okay.
the organization, based on what they present to the kids or what they're taking to the educational service they're taking out to the outreach organizations, they determine what's going to be the best way to evaluate their individual program because each one has slightly different.
Okay.
So.
And then my next question is, how often do we proactively visit these organizations? Like, how often do we do either the monitoring or we're verifying the usage of the funds, right?
Later on in the rule, I believe it does say, I think it's either 3 or 4 years that it says that we need to have a site visit occur. And so Melissa and I did site visits 2 years ago. We went to every single IC organization and evaluated their program and looked at what standards they were hitting on and did a basic overview of their program.
And I'm just curious, how many standards do they normally focus on when they teach a program?
So because they're basically going to the school for just one day. And so they're focused on just one standard.
Okay, so one component of one of the
Yeah.
standards,
Yeah.
whatever their specialty
Yeah,
is.
they're not expected to hit all aspects of it, just whatever they're deciding to focus on within that standard is what they are doing.
Okay, that's my questions.
Any others?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Yeah.
So let's see, the motion I'd like to make is that the committee approve R277443, draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay. All right. Should I repeat that?
Yes.
All right,
Yep.
so the
That's
recommended
great.
motion then is that the committee approve R277-443 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. There's no other questions. Everybody vote. And
Yes.
Yes.
yes. Okay, all right. That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair Green, for getting us started. Our next item is action item 1.4, distribution of money to arts and science organizations amendment. Elise and Liz, who'd like to take it away?
So the significance of the two board roles is that IC has split from HOPS and has their own board role. So the rule you just approved is now IC standalone board role. So HOPS is keeping 444. We're staying the course. We cleaned up a few technical items and aligned with what Milo and IC had changed, just kind of clean up our role. As you mentioned, the outcomes language, just kind of cleaning things up. And yeah, we're pretty much staying the course for POPs. So this is a moment where we're separating, but still being friends.
They split it open.
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Of course, please.
Just a couple of things. How many people are dedicated to this program? How many people do we have on our staff that work in this program?
It's me and Liz Bunker, K through 12 fine arts specialist,
Okay.
and also POPs. I didn't introduce myself before, so yeah, it's me.
Okay, I just wondered how expansive it was and what we.
Yeah.
I kind of know the answer to this question, but I'm asking it because I have people in I have rural districts, right? Tell us how we're better facilitating that equitable distribution of resources in our rural southern Utah areas, those areas that are not central to just remind me. And I know, yeah, I know what they are, but kind of for the public too. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, totally. So per the board rule, POPs is actually required to reach out to every single LEA in a 3-year cycle. So sometimes the really big POPs groups are able to do that to every single LEA. Some of the content-based groups will form a cohort, make sure that they're rotating and getting into, or at least offering services. That's the requirement to every single LEA in Utah. So it's actually a huge lift, and we're in every single school district or school district and working on getting into all the charters. So we're in about 83% of Utah schools. So the push for rural, some of the smaller groups have a little bit more nimble flexibility to get out, and they can hop in a van with a couple of actors, and do these big tours. Whereas the symphony, it's a little harder for 80 musicians to pack it up to some of our rural areas. So they divide and conquer and really work as a collaborative to make sure that they're hitting everybody equitably.
Okay. And then this is, I actually got a complaint a couple of years ago on the performance that was done. Can you just tell me, when you have something like that come in where you have a parent or a student or even an educator that says that the content of that skit, play, whatever, right, or whatever, just really was not community standards for our community, how do we work with that? What happens? Or is there more pre-vetting going on? This, like I said, it's been a couple of years, so I know that the complaint that came in. I'm just wondering what we're doing proactively to keep it in the realm of child appropriate type of stuff.
Can I add on to that? Because I'm reading, it's on line 166, that I think ties in with your question, that an artist or entity hired or sponsored by an organization to provide an educational service shall comply with the procedures and requirements of this rule.
So yes, so the POPs groups are held to the same standards that LEAs are held to. So the Equal Opportunity in Education statute and all that legislation. So we actually have started having the group sign a compliance agreement, which the board rule already encompasses that they must be in compliance with all applicable laws, which those laws are applicable. But an additional step on top of that to make sure that the groups are acutely aware of the changes in legislation, especially as those board rules and statutes are updating. So they have a training and they are signing an additional compliance agreement to make sure that they are hyper aware of the laws and what that means for their offerings. And they do, POPs does our evaluations a little bit differently. They do peer review, so they're working collaboratively and reviewing each other's programs. And additionally, using USB's generated checklist, we vet everything at this point. So a lot has changed since that complaint came through, and there's been a lot of additional.
And I figured I
preventative
decided it's good
yeah.
to always know what are we doing on the protective end, right?
Oh, yeah.
'Cause sometimes
absolutely.
we see the holes, we fix them, and just letting people know what the fix has been.
Yeah, and if there is ever an additional, if there's ever a complaint, we work with the POPs groups. We'll research to see if it was out of compliance, and then there are like oversight and remediation mechanisms within the board rule of how we can take action if we can't come to some sort of conclusion. So
And you want to tell them about the checklist that they have, that they can review their own content to make sure it's. efficient?
yes, so USBE generated a curriculum vetting checklist that we give to the POPs groups as a resource, and the expectation is that every piece of curriculum that they're sharing out is vetted through that checklist.
So Laura, you had a
Actually, both of you addressed this. I just wanted to say that fine arts specialist Liz Bunker, so Lori Bayeski, fine arts coordinator, and our specialist Liz has just done a remarkable job. She's very high touch with the POPs groups, and there are so many moving parts and pieces, as was just illuminated in what the board rule requires, that we reach out to every LEA across the state. So invariably, there would be 1 or 2 complaints per year. And Liz has been incredibly proactive at working individually, both with the complainant as well as our POPs groups to resolve any issues that arise that we're aware of, in addition to all of the scaffolding that is now in place. So yes, you're right, Board Member Earls, that it's quite different than 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I figured so. So I just wanted to know what we'd, been proactive in that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I do. Just on that, just for curiosity, how long does it take then to go through the, finding and lining up those events and following through the checklist, like that whole, to when they show up and do their presentation?
As far as vetting, like whatever they're presenting. So right now, everybody's in, we're at the end of the year cycle, everyone's working on their annual reports, but also preparing their offerings for next year. It's actually my first time with the POPs groups as this annual cycle. So I'm hoping that we can have a summer institute where we can help vet each other's work. Right now, they're all self-vetting everything as they're preparing their offerings for next year. So it's a good question, and I'm hoping to be really involved in that this summer to understand how the POPs groups have been working to vet their curriculum and offerings, and also see how I can be a support, because the more we understand what the guardrails are and what the requirements are, the better we can operate within them and be transparent and, just be better, right? So that's one of my goals for this summer, is to really understand how folks are engaging in all of these requirements and how we can best support them on our end.
Could I get, could you share with us the checklist again, just so I know what it all looks
Is
like
it
for them?
Is it our checklist that we approved?
Yeah, we have put it in backup, so that it's available for everyone afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. So I have just a quick question. Of course, I've been a big fan of POPs forever, and have been involved with a lot of the individual groups that we are able to share with our students across the state. I felt when I was on the NEPA board that one of the biggest challenges was that at the local level, they don't know what they're missing.
Mhm.
And I just would love to just hear a little bit of an update on how are we rising above the local not knowing how good it could be if they would just reach out and say yes and respond to these invitations that come from the POPs groups as they're trying to get out to all of these remote areas, particularly. Do we need an education program to get the local district and charter leadership more on board with what the possibilities are, and what their responsibilities might be as they proactively seek to bring these experiences to their district or to their charter school.
That would be fabulous. So it's definitely a challenge for the POPs groups, and 15 POPs groups. I mean, if every single group inundates, one principal or one LEA art coordinator, that's a lot of touches, and they can definitely get lost in the shuffle. So what's happened over the years is that certain groups have developed really strong relationships with even just a specific educator in one district. And then they can help the other POPs groups kind of get an inroad there. So they're very creative in how they share contacts and build those relationships. And some of the POPs groups have standing, decade-long relationships with certain LEAs. So they're really great about getting together and collaborating and saying, I just cannot get into this LEA. We have tried multiple, ways, and really seeing how other groups were able to get those touches. So they're really collaborative. On our end, we have zhuzhed up our LEA art coordinator meetings, where before the POPs groups would just come and table. So we have 2 LEA art coordinator meetings a year. And this year we did a little bit more of like a robust round table where we had all the different types of offerings, because POPs is so diverse. You can have, an hour-long assembly that you go to the symphony and see the symphony, or you could have a 6-month-long weekly residency. So there's just such a diversity in offerings. So we really wanted to get that home to the LEA art coordinators, that it's not just like a one and done. Like, there are so many different options that you can target your schools that maybe don't have a music educator. Like, this is how you can get music into your schools. And also if you have, a struggling art educator who maybe could use additional support. So we try to find really meaningful connections. So that is something that we're working on with our LEA art coordinators, building that network kind of back up. And
So would you say that across the state that there are art coordinators for every LEA and every charter school, or in some cases, is it just the assistant principal or somebody that is assigned to take care of this? And so there's not quite the level of buy-in that we would have with an arts coordinator who, like all artists, are fighting for opportunities for our kids.
it would be so fabulous if every single LEA had an arts coordinator. We would love that. So obviously our big district LEAs have, dedicated, sometimes a team of staff that handle all of their arts curriculum, and, a dedicated arts coordinator. And for most of our smaller charter LEAs, it's the director. And so sometimes we can get directors to, spend a day with us or half day with us. We were at Springville Art Museum just a few weeks ago. And we did have a charter director show up who was a new director. We were so excited that he came and he really got to know the program. So it's person by person, and really, making those individual connections and building, trying to get that buy-in. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Thank you. We appreciate your, hitting it hard and continuing year by year, week by week, day by day to just maybe make stronger inroads. And then you get somebody trained and really up to speed, and then they move, and then you start over again. I guess that's education.
So a friendly amendment or addition to what Liz has shared is one of the things the new arts team has done is work holistically towards arts for every child across the state of Utah. And so there's much more of a semi-permeable, collaborative membrane between all arts programs in the state. So Liz, as a fine arts coordinator, works very closely with Jamie Workman as a BTS arts specialist. And so there's so much more communication now, even with so the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts Learning Program has coaches in all of in many of our LEAs. So now the coaches are putting forward this information. And so it's not an either or, it's a both and. And so we're looking at an arts ecosystem model for every child, for every LEA, for every student. And we've already seen a lot more recognition where it used to be, oh yeah, POPs is over here and BTS is over here. Now, it's like what works best for each of our LEAs, and let's deliver that in spades.
Excellent. Well, we're headed in a good direction. We certainly express appreciation for the good work that you're doing. And I would be happy to entertain a motion.
Okay, I would be happy to make a motion.
Great.
Let me pull that back up. I just want to, I've just been doing a lot of research over the last month on effectiveness and it with teachers, but there's something about building a professional relationship with other professionals, right? In the same field and knowing that you have that connection and that support, it just increases the, it's a PLC on a broad level, right? But there's something about that just not only do you build off of each other, but you also impact each other for good. Like you find things that are effective and work, right? And you share those. So I'm glad you're trying to make those connections in a way that are so beneficial and helpful for our educators. So, and those in the field. So thank you. All right. Motion would be, let me make sure I have it. Is this 444, right?
Yep.
Oh, what's up here? I can just read out there. I recommend that the committee approve R277444 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
I have a motion that the committee approves R277444 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further discussion? Not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, we're ready to move on to, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So item 1.5, it's 27792, teaching self-government skills for success, classroom communication, and discipline for the work pilot program. This is new. We've got and Leah.
Do we have Elise?
No, maybe Elise.
She's in finance for a minute. And so she'll be here as soon as she can get.
Well, one thing I know, Leah is driving this truck, so.
He's Assistant Superintendent of Student Support. So as Chair Booth said, this is a new rule. It's a very short and simple rule. This rule was needed as a result of legislation. So the legislature implemented this new program called Teaching Self-Government and provided schools the opportunity to opt in to the program and use TSSP funds to pay teachers to be trained to use and support the program, and required that we at the State Board of Education have the program, make the program available. And the legislation has a bunch of criteria for the program that we make it available to schools. So this, and then the other thing that it required is that we have some way to evaluate the effectiveness. So this is a very simple rule that just addresses the requirements of that new opportunity for schools.
Can you tell me about why we're using truancy and absences? Is that is there research that shows that truancy and absences are due to classroom management? Does anyone know?
I'm looking at the law right now to see this. No, I don't know. I don't know if there's specific research that says truancy and absences are due to classroom management.
I'm just wondering why we're putting it in. The other things I can see all those, right, being a direct correlation of a pilot program. I just had a question. I just couldn't correlate the truancies and absences, but I thought maybe I'm missing something. And if there is, then we ought to leave it in. If not, then maybe we ought to take it out. I don't know if because what we're doing is evaluating a program's effectiveness, right? And does the truancy and absences are they reflective of that program, or are they reflective of other things? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. One of the thought processes is that truancy and absences is something that we can actually measure, and that is a factor in the legislation on 3A2.
Okay.
It is a factor in student behavior and discipline. So, and it's something we can actually measure, but your question is very valid. If there's patient
I don't
or
care if
even
it stays there, but if it's not actually, if the program itself is not going to impact the truancies and absences, then truancies and absences.
might not demonstrate that there is effect.
Yeah, so, sorry, I just thought this through real quick because it would, if we're measuring that, it would probably be similar at the end as at the beginning, but that wouldn't necessarily be reflective of the program itself. Right, that's why, and I'm not, if we want to leave it in there, we can. I just want to know that that actually is a mechanism that would show that a pilot program, like, does that make sense? That's why we're having it in there. Because the other things all, to me, seem to be accurate measurement tools.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. So when it comes to truancies and absences, if you look at in the legislation 3B,
Yeah.
Self-government is definitely something related to truancy and absence.
Okay.
And accepting consequences is also something. So it is a mechanism that might get to those particular items.
And I'm fine to leave it in. I just think when we start looking at the outcomes, we need to maybe, it's not weighted 50%, right? Maybe that's right, we're looking at the realities of it, which we always are with pieces, but that was the only one that I thought, is this legit and maybe it is. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Self-government, the term self-government, is this something in education? I mean, I haven't heard it other than when I've seen it through the law, but it's something that feels very, the term doesn't necessarily seem to align with what it means, right? So is there like a history of why it's called self-government or where that came from? I just was confused about that.
Usually in education, the term would be self-governance. And so, but this is called self-government as requested by the statute.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So we're just following the statute by imitating the term that was requested.
How would you define self-governance in education in regards to classrooms and classroom management?
So the items in the statute in B, except not I necessarily, but accepting consequences, respecting boundaries, accepting criticism, disagreeing appropriately, following instructions, following through with assignments, meeting deadlines, providing quality work.
So it's that personal responsibility is really
personal responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we call that self-governance.
That's what it's titled.
Okay.
Law.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. It just means different things in different. I know, that's why I was trying to wonder. I was like, where is this come? I didn't understand this word or this term. So I understand what the law is asking us to do.
Right.
But the self-government part doesn't seem to fit in.
That isn't a term that we.
It's not a like common. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And it's also confusing because it's like, is it self-government, governance, or government? Self-government doesn't work for me, but self-governance for like basically the government that you create within the classroom, right? To be like, here are our classroom rules, here are, okay. Interesting.
Which would be a combination of both of those, right? It's literally setting the structures up within your classroom with the expectations and then individuals and teachers being responsible and accountable.
Right.
So.
Okay. That's a pretty good definition. If you want to put it on the internet, you could maybe start selling books.
I've been working on that.
Yeah.
I got my spare time.
Yeah.
I have one other question. I'm good with the rule the way it is. I just had that one that I was thinking it does this, right? If someone, because I actually had a district reach out to me and say, when is this rolling out? Who do we contact? You know what I mean? So what does that look like? Do they reach out to Leah?
Yeah, so
or is there an individual, do we have another staff member assigned?
We will have another staff member assigned. We have an open position. So right now it is me.
Okay.
So our goal was to get the rule passed and then we will get the contract in place for the curriculum.
Okay.
It will likely be me who sends out an email to all the superintendents and charter directors to say this is now available.
So someone would just contact you if they are being proactive or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our next step is to get the contract in place and have the curriculum available.
Okay.
But we need a rule first.
Who is, where does the contract come from? Like, who is that with?
So that, and this actually applies
The
to your
contract
question.
For the position, right, is.
No, the contract is for the curriculum.
Oh, for the curriculum, okay.
Yeah, and the materials. And the materials may have to be purchased, which the law allows TSSP funds to be used for that. But this website, Teaching Self-Government, is who we will be, this company is who we will be contracting with.
You can't make money on this anymore. Sorry.
Yes.
I wasn't really gonna do that.
So,
Yeah, and because the legislature was so specific in what they wanted, it shouldn't take very long. We've already met with Adam, with purchasing director, to be able to get this in place, so it shouldn't take very long to get that in place.
And down on line 29 and 30, where it says
Of
that
the rule.
of the rule, where it says the program's measured on a Likert scale. Do you put that together? I just Googled how do you pronounce this word? It's Likert. Likert. Do you put that together, or does that come through Teaching Self-Government, the program?
No, we would do
You
that.
do that? Okay. How many questions do you anticipate? Like, what do you feel would be productive to be evaluating?
That's a very good
This
question.
is a new.
So what we're trying to evaluate is those criteria in the legislation, right? And so we haven't gotten that far, but we would be asking educators to score, and a Likert scale is, it's not happening to, it's happening all the time kind of thing, right? To score each of those criteria, pre and post. And Elise and I talked about that quite a bit. What is the best way to meet the requirement in the legislation, but to not put an undue burden on the educator, but also to get information that's actually useful, right? So I would anticipate, and we actually have an expert in the agency writing those kinds of evaluation tools, Went Shooter. You've met him in other contexts. I anticipate we would need to ask just a couple questions per criteria to be, so not very long.
Do you think you'll use the bill here?
Yes, yeah,
3A,
those criteria. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you'll be creating that. The teachers will take that.
Pre and post.
Okay.
And then they'll take it, they'll implement, and then they'll do it again. And then in the first round, then we would be able to actually evaluate the evaluation. Is the evaluation giving us any useful information? And if the program continues, because this is pilot, right? The program continues, then we would be able to adjust the evaluation based on, did we get the information that we need, that the legislature wanted, and that's actually useful.
So when you declare, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, when you say it's a pilot program, which I know it is, I'm just wondering, do we know how long that is for? How many years? It's 3 years. Okay. So will it be a pilot program for 3 years and then launch, or we're putting this together and launching it fall of this year?
Yeah, we're gonna launch immediately.
Okay.
And how much, how is this curriculum delivered? Is it delivered, at what level, what age group? All teachers, K through 12? No, who is actually delivering it? And then recently I've become ever so much more aware of how many minutes for each content area and for each thing that's being required. I've just been going the rounds to try to find 5 minutes of additional seat time for lunch, which we can't find because the USBE has given out this recommended number of minutes for every content area. When you add them all up, there's not enough minutes in the day to cover all of those things we recommend. And of course, then we say, well, we don't really, this is not required, this is your choice, but somebody down there's got to choose. So what are they gonna, what is their choice gonna be in terms of delivery of this additional, very valuable information that is now being required by law? I'm just saying, we just keep
Well,
adding more.
I guess I'm looking at this a little different, because when you're talking about, and maybe, I'm sorry, maybe I'm interrupting, I didn't mean to, but I think one of the biggest problems we're having is classroom management type of things, right? So this is to me, when I looked at this, it's a classroom management type of situation, right? And with that being said, when you put skills in, classroom management skills, whether it's these or others, right? That's what you do at the first of the year. You establish, right, frameworks, and then you follow through with those. And I could be wrong, but
So I just didn't understand what was the curriculum, the contract for this, these teaching materials. So are they workbooks or that? I have no idea what it is exactly, but it does take a slice of time. And so my little girl in Canyon Crest Elementary School is still going to have an upset stomach because she doesn't have 5 minutes to eat. But
Well, I kind of feel like our whole agenda today is a lot of those things that all throughout when I've been going through them, it's like, this week I was like, how do they have time? How do these LEAs have time to implement all of these and do all of these trainings and make sure all of these things are happening? So I think this is just another one of those.
And I'm certainly not questioning the validity or the value. I mean, this is great. And so is reading and arithmetic and every other one of all of those really good things. But the teacher, oh my goodness. I sat in a meeting, a cottage meeting last Monday, and there were a lot of teachers that attended, and they listened to the parents as the parents just went off on everything that is wrong with the world of public education. And those poor teachers that teach many of the children in our neighborhood who were gathered together in this cottage meeting, they were just like, you just kind of had to pick them up after it was all over because they felt so deflated after they try so hard and work so hard and are doing so many things and they teach. You want us to teach this? Okay, great. Okay, great. Just add one more thing to my list of all of the things that I'm already doing. And I don't know what value this discussion is really having other than we gotta make sure that we're finding ways to protect and support these teachers and figuring out how is it delivered and what do we take away, what do we take off of their plate if this is being inserted even as a pilot.
This is a choice though, right? I mean, you have to choose this, right? Over multi-tier. I mean, there's other things that they would do this in place of.
Okay.
Right? This isn't, if you've got other behavioral systems in place, this might be,
Okay, that's
so,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's also important to add that because it's part of the TSSA or TSSP funding, it would have to go through a pretty robust community decision-making process that has the TSSA program comes with, they have to create a plan and it has to be run through the land trust council at their school. And so there would be quite a bit of input, I would imagine, from teachers and parents through the process in deciding how they wanted to implement it and where they wanted it to fit and prioritize it. So I would hope that that would help with that as well.
Good.
What's the communication then that comes from USBE? Would it be from USBE to all like district wide? Is this something that's kind of sent out to every single district and
To say it's
Like,
available,
to
yeah.
say it's
Yeah,
available?
we will provide the information to them, to all the LEAs to say this is now available. The superintendents and the charter directors and the HR directors, special ed directors, and curriculum directors already know that this law passed because we've already provided that information to them. So then as soon as we have a contract in place and it's available, then we'll send out an email that says, this is now available, this is how you access it, this is who you contact, here's the rule.
Will that be something that their local school boards will have to vote on? Or is this, who makes that decision, right? On the local level, is it superintendent that says we're implementing this, or does that get triggered to the local school board?
That would, I think it would be different in different LEAs.
Okay, I just want to know, just as you know, information for each of our local school districts to say, hey, you might consider this 3-year pilot program, has these benefits, go ahead and look into it. But I don't know if that's
So
like,
the LEA would have to approve participation, because 5B in the statute says the reporting requirement for a participating LEA. So even if it was happening at the school level, the LEA would have to know that it was happening, because the reporting will come from the LEA.
so is that the principal then?
Now that would be the superintendent or the charter director. Yeah, so the principal and the school, like to Elisa's point, would say, hey, we want to do this. This is how I envision this happening. Hey, we want to do this. This is a good idea for our community and for our school. And talk to the charter director if it's a multi-building charter, or the superintendent, the school district, and say, hey, we want to do this. The reporting requirement is through the central office level. So are you good with this? Because the LEA or school can choose to participate in the program, but the LEA is responsible for the reporting. So if the LEA said, hey, we don't have capacity for this, I think that would be a discussion between the superintendent or charter director and the principal. And maybe the other direction too, the student charter director or the superintendent may say, hey, school, this would be a really good idea for you to participate in, so maybe either direction. But the LEA does have some responsibility according to the statute.
Would you like a motion?
That'd be great.
Questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. The motion is that the committee approve R277932 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
We have a motion that the committee approved R277932 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you. We're now moving on to item 1.6, 277613 LEA policies and training regarding bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, retaliation, and abusive conduct. Elise and Brenda understand this.
Thank you so much, Chair. So this change is coming about largely because of legislation that passed during the last session that added an additional piece to the LEA responsibility regarding bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, retaliation, and that was in implementing an action plan. So they have been required to create policies and rules around these things, and then to investigate if there are allegations of one of these things. But this new requirement was to create an action plan and a communication plan for parents and members of the community if something were to occur and be validated. So that part is added in the rule. Let's see, so section 4. But we also, the other thing I really would like you to understand about this rule is that it's very tricky and sensitive, because we are dealing with sometimes conflicting definitions when it comes to our state code, our policies, our own internal rules, as well as federal code versus like the literature on these kinds of issues. There's just a lot of really specific terms of art. And so we did go through and kind of and make some changes to the definitions to make sure that it's really clear for LEAs what we're expecting them to do and how we're expecting them to report it. One conversation that we are anticipating having in between this meeting and the August board meeting is actually with our data team to say, how can we make sure that this is easy for LEAs? Because they understand the law, but then when they go into their computer program to enter, the instance of bullying, it's not always as clear how the law matches onto the reporting system. And so we did the very best that we could and got all the input that we could, but we just want to do one last check with the IT team and make sure that they're on board with these definitions. So that's just a heads up on that. But those are the big changes. It's a very long rule. I apologize, but if you have any questions, I'd love to take them.
Questions or concerns?
My least favorite rule in the whole. I'm just saying in general, and I know this has a long history. It had years rolling out, and it just has been. I don't even know where to start. I just feel like we record so much data, and how much of that I know we have to, right? I know there's it's in law and stuff, but well, where do you want to start?
At the very beginning.
Let me just start. I don't like trauma-informed care language, and not because I don't like trauma. I don't like taking care of people that have trauma. I just, the more, and I expressed this yesterday, there's a lot of research coming out that trauma-informed care practices, because they're treating adverse experiences as if they're trauma, when there's actually growth that comes when you have adverse experiences. We're treating a lot of these as if trauma. Anyways, it's creating a fragile society. We get concerned. Sorry, I'm going off for a minute, so you just have to be patient with me.
We're taking it.
Thank you. Thank you. We all get our own thing, right? I just have concerns that the message we're sending is anything that's adverse in a student's life is traumatic, and it's trauma. We've shifted from individuals that truly, and I say truly, not that I'm belittling anybody's experiences, but there are experiences that are truly traumatic, and there are experiences that are normal everyday life, and we're mixing the two. And I just am concerned that we're seeing a fragile society in our youth, and we can say it's the cell phones, we can say it's a lot of things. I think it is. I think it's a mix of society. We're even becoming a therapeutic society where everything is about a therapy and emotions, and the trauma and care practices, trauma-informed practices feed into that. And yet we do need to be sensitive, right, to kids that have that sensitivity. So I don't even know what to do, because I looked at 5 different definitions of trauma-informed care, and none of them are the same. So I look at this and I'm like, is this trauma-informed care? And I don't, like I said, I don't even know where to go with it, because it's in law, right? And not in a lot of places, but it's in a handful of places. I just feel like it's a couple of things. Who defines trauma? How are they educated in such a way that they can define something as trauma? These are I don't even think the professionals agree on that. So it's, okay. All right, there's my 5 minutes of rant. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anytime. But I'm just, in my mind, I'm like, who really understands trauma? I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, I think we're going to see more and more research over the next couple of years that just really pushes back on that, saying, that adverse experiences are good for growth, right? They create a growth in people. We all have that. When we have an adverse experience, we change the way we do things. We have to engage differently, and there's the potential for growth. There's also the potential for, right, harmful things. But anyways,
It's part of trauma.
Going after it, and when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
yeah.
And there is a certain amount of that, but our kids, because we want to fix everything with our helicopter parents, and we'll just make everything nice and wonderful, and they can't handle the adversity and how tough it can really be. without mom and dad just jumping in to fix it. So that I think your point is very.
Or others too. It's not just mom and dad. I mean,
Yeah.
as a society, we're doing that, right? So
And
I'm sorry, I didn't
finding,
mean to-
no, well, I think part of that though, from my understanding is that the trauma informed care also is partly teaching resiliency, right? So like helping kids navigate out of like this hard thing happened to you, what are you gonna take from it? And there could also be that way of looking at it, like.
yeah, it could be. Do we define it that way?
No,
Do you see what
you're saying there's a lot of definitions,
I know.
but I agree, like, I think that oftentimes we see, that bubble or pedestal being placed on a child, maybe oftentimes, and sometimes it's like, no, they just did really bad on this test, so that's why that's their grade, right? But that piece of it, which you were discussing, is just feels like one piece of this entire thing, right? Overall,
Yeah.
on your least favorite rule.
Yeah. Not my least favorite role. So, okay. I don't.
So I'm getting smiles from these two women who have spent a lot of time with this.
Yeah.
What would you say in response to those concerns?
Sure.
And should we just move forward?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. I just want to point out that that's language that's been in the rule. We didn't change that language.
I
I'm
know.
not sure where that language came from.
So maybe that's the question. Does it need to be in there?
Just from a legal standpoint, this policy is very narrow, or this rule is very narrow to certain policies at the LEA, right? So I think in this context, if we wanted to take it out, that's not my decision to make, that's totally fine. But I do think it is applying to a very narrow set of circumstances and policies. So I do think that there's kind of that to weigh with as well. So either way is fine.
Where is it referenced else in there? Let me download it so I can actually search it, but.
We're on draft 3, by the way.
Control that on these
Draft
things.
3.
Yes, I
Draft
apologize.
3.
Caught a mistake this morning.
Okay, so I just am wondering where it's at, if it's.
So on line 303, I believe, it's in a may statement. So following a verified incident of bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, if appropriate, an LEA may support involve students through trauma-informed practices if appropriate. So there's a lot of kind of couching language around that one.
Which then doesn't mean anything.
So yeah, so that's the only reference to it outside of the definition itself.
Sure, ma'am.
Yes, Becca.
So yeah, in line 94, we do have a definition of trauma-informed care where it talks about means a strengths-based service delivery approach grounded in understanding of and responsiveness to the impact of trauma. It goes on to say emotional safety for the student subjected to the incident and creating opportunities to build a sense of control and empowerment. So we do have a definition for it. And I think just it's being mindful of, obviously, if a student's being bullied, that's an adverse childhood experience. And so how are we going to respond to that student? Are we going to move them from a classroom or are we going to support them in the current environment that they're in? And so giving them that power.
Yeah, overall in this rule, it feels like there's a lot about what to do when a student needs to be disciplined, right? Or there's been an incident where a student has done something, right? And there is this part, this small section, which is the section you're talking about in the rule that talks about, okay, we have all of these things to deal with this student that maybe is bullying or is abusive or has using whatever language that they say in here. And then there's a part that's like, but what do we do about the student that has gone through, who's on the other side of that, right? And I do think it's important to include that piece in the overall picture and in the rule. What that looks like, I'm not sure, and I'm not an expert on discipline and this piece within a school, but it feels like it is important to have some way of addressing that student that may be affected by.
And how do we want it? So how do we want to address the student that is going to be affected? What are trauma-informed practices? What are they? Let's nail them down.
If you go to line 340, 613-6, it's response to verified incidents of cyberbullying. Does that begin to address
Yeah, and
this question?
that's where it speaks to, like on line 373, supportive measures designed to preserve the student's access to educational services and the well-being of that student. So that's in reference to the student that is impacted by the bullying.
Do you need to go see someone because this happened to you? You want to talk about what happened to you? It's really interesting that this came, like, I, in preparation for this meeting, and then this morning I was hearing a story about how there's this wave of high school boys that are making AI generated photos of women nude, like students. So they'll take a picture of a girl at school and then they'll AI generate her without clothing on. And they talked a lot about how the school wasn't prepared to handle the fact that there were all these pictures floating around of students women at their school without clothing on. And the student got suspended for 1 day, and then the parents were really upset about it, right? And the whole time I was like thinking about these girls, and I was like, once this photo is created, like, is this photo of them that's fake, without their clothes on, gonna haunt them the rest of their lives on the internet? Like, where does it die, right? And so that part, what I see it as like, you know, one example of many is like, how do we also talk about and have a plan for what happens to those students? What happens to those girls that have had those photos made of them, right? And that, to me, what that care looks like, but providing support for those students.
So that's the language I think
Yes.
we use. Supportive measures designed to preserve the students' access to educational services and opportunities while protecting the safety and well-being of other students. That's what we mean. Like I said, I don't know that we know what trauma, I know there's lots of practices out there, but not all those practices are. I just think our teachers aren't qualified to make informed decisions on trauma. Does that make sense? Like, it's a term that in psychology, I don't think they even are, you know, therapists don't even necessarily have the same system of understanding around. So that's where my concern is. But what is it we want? We want to create a supportive environment, right? I would recommend we took out trauma-informed care, and where it's referenced, and we put in just that it's supportive services. Whatever that language is.
One thing, just really quick.
Yes, yep.
So because this is an LEA-wide policy, I think we often are thinking about teachers, but in this case, there's actually several spots where the LEA has to define whose role it is to take certain jobs. And so it would be part of their policy to define exactly who within the LEA system would be making these kinds of calls, likely a school, you know, someone who has the qualifications, not me. So just wanted to pick that out as well.
Yeah, and to add on to what Elise was saying, this generally does not happen in the classroom. It wouldn't happen by a teacher. This would happen by a school counselor or school-based mental health professional.
Okay, let me look at words.
Do we need to
So if we
specify that?
fundamentally, like, I mean, if we all agree on what aspects of care to a student who has had an incident happen to them we can take out trauma-informed care and just talk about what those pieces of supporting the student.
Yeah,
maybe
sorry, I'm
experienced
just
and
backing up
be.
that section to see where it leads into it. So I'm going from 1 to 2 to, you know what I mean? So I can follow it. So an LEA shall investigate allegations of incidents. That's 2.
Can I pose a general question? And it is about trauma-informed care. It seems that there's a lot more trainings around this, and they want every teacher to be trained in that. Is that true in Utah?
Answer sure. So we do have a statute for a grant, the School-Based Mental Health Qualified Personnel Grant, that requires any LEA that receives that grant, they need to have that training for their staff. But beyond that, there's no requirement unless an LEA is a recipient of the grant.
What is that grant called?
The School-Based Mental Health Qualified Personnel Grant.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I agree. Well done. So school-based mental
I
health.
worked on that for a long time.
And what's the involvement that we see with that so far? If you know, and you don't have to.
I don't know because the purview of that grant is not on my team. That calls to the Safe and Healthy Schools team. So I can't answer that question.
Okay,
But
so,
we can get back to you with that
That's
answer.
okay.
so as I'm looking at this, it falls under 7, which is under the section of reporting incident investigations and allegations, right? So we're looking under 7. Following a verified incident of bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, retaliation, or abusive conduct, an LEA shall create and implement an action plan for each incident in accordance with section 50. Okay. Oh, no, it's under this. Sorry. There's an 8. I wasn't following very good there. Following a verified incident, an LEA may. Why couldn't we just use that language there? Why can't we put the language from down below that says, let's see if I can. 340. So I'm on line, 303. Could we use the language from 340? Sorry, where is it? 363 that says an LEA may something along supportive measures designed to preserve a student's access to educational services and opportunities. Is that widely different? Isn't that the intent of trauma-informed practices, is to preserve the students' access to their ability to be accessing educational services and opportunities? Or you feel like it's too narrow?
I would add to that the student feels safe in the educational environment.
Okay. So could we use that with including that too?
We're happy to do whatever.
Does that work for that? I know, I'm trying to get your professional feedback. And it probably is for the trauma informed. I just had, like I said, I think there is a growing body of research, and I think it's lending itself in the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to see pretty big pushback on this philosophical shift. That's what my motion would be. I would take out trauma informed at the top. I would take it out on line 303. And I would put the language in from 343 or 363. I just need to get it written in the right.
On line 303?
Yes, on 303.
Oh,
We would put,
you gotta always think.
so an LEA may, and then on 303, we would put the language from 363, and it may need to be reworked a little bit, and including in there that safety element.
I'm just gonna put the whole chunk in the motion. I apologize, but just so that we're clear.
Elise, you're amazing.
Yes.
Up on it.
Wow.
So is this the part that we're removing, or is that the part that you want to add?
I'm gonna add this part.
Okay.
So on where the B,
Andrew, can you just
may,
There.
That's terrible.
Let me see.
I think it would be may provide supportive measures designed to preserve, so it may provide supportive measures, so we'd strike B, and then that language would sit in where B is, if that makes sense. Yes. And let me go back up to the definition of.
So it's orange and brown. Sure, may I ask a question? Yeah. Cheryl, I was thinking back to.
I copied what Karen sent me, so I remember the colors,
also
but
what
I don't remember.
Denise was saying in response to the question, which is the who is doing it. And as I was going, I was just trying to get all this put together on like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Would there ever be a time when someone in the educational setting would be providing what would be trauma informed care? So we talked about the Likert scale in the very beginning, like here's something that's just, they, fell down or they, whatever. And then there's something that's progressive to this end where they would then need to be referred on or referred out or whatnot. So that means that it's not a part of this rule. Does that make sense?
Does that allow for that to still happen in there or not?
That's what I'm trying to get to is by providing supportive, is supportive at the teacher level, and then there is a level that is an outside counselor, that is a whatever kind of counselor, I don't know, Leah would know, whatever kind of counselor that would provide that, but it's not the teacher. Is that what you're trying to get to? Like, if you're not qualified to do trauma-informed care, or is it that it just needs to not be in here? That's what
I think the supportive services speak to that. I mean, I don't think, in my view, it doesn't limit that, right? It could even be, I mean, it could be an outside entity,
Yes.
you know, that they contract with, right, to come in and help, or it could be, I don't know, the school counselors are
Honestly,
qualified.
this could end up being escalated to
Yeah.
public safety.
Yeah,
Because
it could be.
it's part of our safety bill,
Yeah.
right? And the idea here is, what can we do and what plans can we have in place so that LEAs, if an incident does, heaven forbid, happen at a school, so they can look back on how they not only disciplined and managed an incident
Right.
or continuous incidents with a student, so they can have that as on record. We had a student that had this behavior this many times and we have record and tracking of it. So if that student does end up doing something terrible, they have that evidence. But the next question people are gonna ask is, well, what did you do for the students that were impacted? And that's the second part of this. And all of this together is just to try and make sure our LEAs are prepared and equipped to handle incidents and have record of that in case something bad does happen, or to prevent something bad from happening, right?
So then it may need more than that yellow sentence, because it says supportive measures designed to preserve the student's access to educational services, opportunity, and sense of safety. So there might need to be,
Or another one.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So what would that be then?
Smart enough to find it.
Tanya, you have a suggestion?
Yeah, like as I said, when we say this is no longer educational, this is something outside of it. So it's our job to make sure we have the educational services.
Well, you would
and
say
the
something like
opportunity
qualified professionals or something.
Mental health professionals.
Sorry, if I may,
Yeah.
just insert a comment here. There's a difference between trauma-informed practices and trauma-sensitive practices, which could be as simple as a teacher welcoming a student when they come into the classroom and making them feel safe in their classroom. And trauma-informed interventions or therapeutic type interventions for this type of situation. So I think we have to be really clear when we're talking about this, what exactly are we referring to? Because when LEAs are talking about trauma-informed practices, oftentimes it's those tier 1 universal prevention types approaches. Does that make sense?
which could be the supportive measures.
Like, I know that that's child's parents are going through a divorce. I'm gonna make sure I check in with them
Correct.
throughout the week because I know they're having a hard time.
Right.
That's like level one, right?
Correct. That's a universal approach. We're gonna do everything we can to make sure that all students within my classroom feel safe in this
And
environment.
would you call that, I would call that supportive services, right? That's supportive of the student.
But I think we're saying there might be kind of like with board member Real's example, right, where it kind of goes beyond that.
So then we need to add another component in there with
That's what I'm saying.
something about professionals,
Yeah.
qualified professionals or something. I don't know what the
Qualified professional support. Is that broad enough to encompass all sorts of types of?
Educational trying to access, so
I don't know if it would be support.
Beyond LEA staff.
Well, it would be services, wouldn't it? Qualified professional services or?
Some LEAs do have clinically licensed school-based
Yeah.
mental health professionals. And so you wouldn't want to say outside of the school.
Yeah, you said just, it would be, have to be qualified. That's the difference, is I don't,
Yes,
we want,
yeah.
yeah.
You could say a licensed, what is it? What's the term? School-based mental health professional?
Yeah, because I'm not,
Support, excuse me.
Of course. Please jump right in.
So, for those online, Leah Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent. So it says provide supportive measures. I think if you change the measures to services, designed to presume, if therapy could be the service.
yes, yeah.
So I think, to your point,
I think
board
that makes
member Earl, changing that word broadens the access. I don't think you have to define who does it because you already
Well, I
have
don't
that.
think you wanted to find
You
out.
have that in your other
Yeah.
rule. You have that in the licensing rule, exactly what people can do and who the right people are. So in this rule, you're just saying access.
Whatever they, yeah.
So could
whatever
we
level of
could
service
put
the
though,
student needs.
provides supportive services, which may include
Access to.
high qualified personnel. I mean, if we wanted to say that. Right? But I don't know that it's necessary.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Elise, you had it. Mommy.
Oh, no, that fixed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you too.
Really do get worse.
Trying to.
So do we want services in in 2 times in that sentence? Provide supportive services designed to preserve students' access to educational services.
Does it continue? So not let's say, psychologists and
Education?
Counseling, on the counseling with the degrees associated with being a certified
Yeah.
For the educational programs that. But no, it's already open.
Or
I like
educational
what they were
opportunity.
Trying to get it to
Yeah,
qualified
yeah.
people instead of to anyone, right? That's-
How's that? Not repetitive, but still.
So can I ask you another question? We just had concerns about, this is online, sorry. Should we vote on this and then
Of course.
move on to the next one?
Is it related? Do you want to do it?
That's not related. It's a next, let's do the motion and then we'll go from there.
Who would like to?
It would, okay, so it would probably, oh no, it has the may up above, sorry. So it's a may still, right? This may be a possibility.
Okay. Any other concerns? We're ready for the motion.
Should it be an and? Is this an and or is it or? Should it be an or? Because these are possibilities, but not, am I wrong in saying that?
And
Because it could be A, or it could be B,
Okay.
or it could be C. And it doesn't have to be those. Is that accurate?
is there a C?
It could be one of
Well,
those.
it
It doesn't
really
have to
depends
be
on
all.
the situation.
Yeah, so it has to be an or. Is that right, Elise?
Yes, I was just conferring.
Okay,
Got it.
okay, just making sure, right?
Thank you for catching.
Because it's not like you have to do all these things, right? It's
Right.
like, it may be this, this, or this, depending on the situation, right?
the definition of what supportive services are. Does that require, a clarifier?
I don't know. Do you want to do a
I
definition?
mean, often it could depend on the parents too. So like if the parent is like, we already have a mental health counselor that my student sees, so we'll make sure to, you know what I mean? So it seems like it could be so much that maybe there is a definition there.
Who is providing the supportive service in this reference?
Of course.
Make a comment. I also want to add that a supportive service here in this type of instance might be that the students are separated into different classrooms, right? So we're not just focusing in on clinical services or services just to deal with maybe the mental health issues or things of the student who was bullied. But it's also, it could be those other types of supportive services, like we're gonna separate them, we're gonna make sure they don't see each other in the hallway. So.
Yeah, if you're not part of that plan,
It's all
they
part of
discuss.
that.
Correct. Right, and so the parent of the student who may have been affected can work with the school to create that plan, but the student who was affected doesn't have any punishment in their activities or sports or their classes, but the other student might be moved, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, maybe a parent doesn't want the student moved from that classroom. And so we have to be really careful if we define this, that it's all inclusive of all of that.
So I think I am liking this. If we add the or develop a communication process, what does that mean?
That's described in another
Yeah,
section.
I saw that in the rule. This is the most massive rule. I just saw it.
It's on 305. So it's what would a communication process be in this situation? But it's related to an incident, right?
Yes, it was required by statute. So that was part of the new action plan communication process requirements in statute this last session.
So that a parent isn't like, wait, what happened at school? I didn't know that this was happening.
So is
I
that
need to communicate with
to
both.
a parent or other teachers within the
It could be
building?
both, like if something, like, okay, say someone puts something terrible on Snapchat. Okay, happens all the time at schools every day. And they do that, then however many, that could have impacted like hundreds of students who saw it on Snapchat. So then they have to have a communication plan that they're talking the whole school, students, faculty, staff, plus the parents about like, this happened today and we're addressing it, but keeping people like up to date on what's happening. So everyone's not like, what are you gonna do about this thing that was on Snapchat? Or to de-escalate the situation within the school.
And so,
Okay.
That's good.
Subsection 6 talks all about that. So a school or LEA shall create an action plan for an incident that includes a communication plan designed to keep each parent updated on the implementation of the action plan with respect to the student to whom the incident was directed, a tailored response to that incident that addresses the student's needs. So it kind of outlines.
351.
Okay, did we get the safety element in there that we needed? Okay,
Okay.
okay, the sense of safety, oh, there we go, all right. So we're ready for a motion.
Okay. Got my glasses on. All right, the motion is that the committee amend draft 3. So it would need to strike, part of that needs to be striking the definition of trauma-informed up above.
We're doing that both in one motion.
Yeah,
We can.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's get it.
And then amending section 5.8b to read, provide supportive services designed to preserve the student's access to educational opportunities and a sense of safety or. So let's strike the language that's in there and then update the language.
Okay, what she just said is the motion, because I'm not sure where I'm gonna read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. As
Okay.
follows.
Sorry, folks,
Yeah.
that was Robert's rules to the hilt. All right. Any further question or discussion? Not those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Did you say not those in favor?
I said all those.
those
I'm
in
sorry.
favor, like, no, we all just.
All those in favor, say aye. So 4 ayes, we're unanimous. Okay.
So on this same area, so line 294, for every incident that happens of bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, retaliation, or abusive conduct, we're going to create and implement an action plan for each incident.
Chairman, on 294, so on draft 3, we switched it so it's a verified incident.
Oh, got you, okay. I'm like, okay, we should not be complaining at all about any kind of thing that we're doing with the other. This is going to take so much time. So a verified, thank you. Was that just recently added in? That's huge, right? Because otherwise it's every time there's a complaint or anything, yeah, okay.
Jenny, I'm seeing that crossed out on mine. Are you on a different?
There's draft 3 at the very bottom of the list on the agenda item.
I apologize. We found some things this morning. Wanted to make sure we.
Yeah. Okay, so that changes that for me. You don't need to talk about it. I'm just like, oh my gosh, if we're.
And there is a lot about what is included in verified, right? Because like you can't make accusations and then do all of this based on an accusation. It has to be verified.
Okay. Any other questions? This is just, I don't know.
It's huge. Honestly, it just makes me have a lot of sympathy for the schools for having to navigate these sort of situations, but hopefully it helps hinder any sort of incidents that could potentially happen.
Sorry, I'm just still looking down through. Others. Are there other changes in draft 3 that we need to maybe be aware of?
We added a couple of citations, so that doesn't change substantively. The one thing that was added that's a little substantive on line 245, hopefully it's in the subsection 5, that the LEA needs to designate an individual who can, at the LEA level, who can provide training and support for all of these things that are happening at a school level. So we just outlined, and that again is required by code. So we were just making sure that that is also covered. But that was it.
Okay. I do have a question a little bit about section, it's line 256, 2B. An LEA shall investigate allegations of incidents described in subsection 1A by interviewing the student subjected to the incident, and so forth, so on. What I've seen sometimes or I've heard is that there's two parts. One is that a student has come to the adult and said, hey, this is happening. And then that's been met with a response of, some reasoning, just be kind or just be nice, or we got to be careful. We have to be nice to these people, whatever, when that student is actually experiencing trauma or bullying or things that are, kind of are starting to tip into that area. That's never, those complaints aren't recorded. And then this situation escalates into a bigger scenarios, but there's no paper trail associated with that student trying to initiate that process. And then that scenario tips into, it's big, it kind of blows up. And then the student is then, they can do one of two things. They can go underground and say, no, because now they have trauma and they're not going to report it again because they weren't believed in the first place. The second thing is that they are a student, and if the personnel is not believing the student that this is happening, then that student can be interviewed, and because the dynamics of the power, right, with the adult, that interview or that, as in 2A states, is not going to come out with maybe sometimes, again, because of all the dynamics I just laid out, the other end with being that student actually being represented. So my point for this, or my question is there a way that the student can have their parent or guardian in there with them when they are talking about difficult situations that have occurred inside the school? And I'm not seeing that. And I'm only referencing the fact that there's a power dynamic there naturally, that a student is below the authority of school personnel. So I would like to see a parent in the room with the student if there is an investigation going on, so that it's almost like representation.
Without having parents in the room. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Isn't there a different rule?
Well, line 260 does state that they'll be interviewed. It doesn't, the parents of the student subjected to the incident will be interviewed as a part of this investigation, but it doesn't state that they'll be in the same room.
Yeah.
It says they provide parental notification, right? That's mentioned often.
And there's nothing that prohibits that in this rule. And I believe that there is another rule, I'm looking for it right now, that does outline the need for that because of that power dynamic. I believe it came out, right? Or was it code? Or is it just in police investigations?
I don't think it would necessarily apply here. It could, it just wouldn't.
At the request of the student or at the request of, they can have
Yeah.
someone else in the room
Yeah.
that is their advocate or
Support person.
What I'm seeing a little bit of a disconnect on the field or in the field is that when scenarios have tipped out of control, and then the claim is coming that nothing's happened, but those two things happened. Certain students went underground because it triggered problems, and now they're being triggered as the problem instead of when they were trying to come saying there is a problem, right? So they were kind of, don't shoot the messenger, but they were shot. And then the investigation is closed now. That to backtrack discredits the validity of the accusation. So I'm just trying to, I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting at other than trying to translate this rule into a real life scenario.
So let me clarify to see if this is what you're asking. To me, it's two different things, maybe. One is what happens to the unverified? Like what happens to the incidents that may, have, stack upon each other, but they become unverified and is there a place for those to then at some point be, well, there's a habit, there's a consistency here, and we can actually go back to some of those once something has been verified in the future or whatnot. And then the second part of that is at the time of disclosure or at the time of, the student wanting the support in some way to be able to say, this is happening to me, please believe me. Do they have an advocate in the room to say, please, that they feel safe in disclosing this? So is there two parts to that, or are you just wanting the second part?
I think there's probably two parts, right? And then
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that the last two comments that we've had go exactly to what I was talking about at the beginning, how delicate this is, right? Because if we fall too far on this side, right, of making a record of every single allegation and following up, then we get into the area where we have to have a plan for every single alleged incident, right? And that's also burdensome and leaves kids behind. And so I think that's part of what we're meeting with the IT team over the summer in July, is to say, where do these things get tracked and how can we make sure that we're tracking both the alleged and the verified, but in ways that are doable for schools, but also give support to students in the ways that they need. And so I think that's exactly, and I'm hoping when we come in August that we'll have a clearer picture of exactly what that looks like on the schools and that we can answer that question for you.
It's gotta be really hard because I know teachers have to filter the tattletelling and they have to filter the oversensitive student, or even though that whatever can tip them into not being able to handle things. So I recognize that. I guess what I would be definitely advocating for is that when is it that it jumps to the next level? And if that happens, bringing somebody with that student that allows them that kind of internal support right out of the gate, instead of they talk to the students and got that. Now, I've seen this play out very well in school districts where there's a situation that happens, they have talked to the student, but then the parent is called, and then the parent and student and principal and vice principal have a formal meeting, and then they have the sergeant or the school resource officer there in the room as well. So I think that probably, is that developed in each school, or is that required somewhere that each school has that quality, that procedure put in place? And is it this rule?
Part of this to have people assigned and to have an investigation process in place in their policy. These are just the things that are required, and their policies are much broader than this right here. These are just the bare bones. And so then their personal policies follow, fill that out.
I'm wondering if you're asking, so I'm looking at line 353, it's part of the communication plan. And all of this kind of seems past tense, like once they're notified and once they're aware, or once,
It's on line 256, what do you think? Yeah.
Because what you're asking is during the telling of and during the process, the pre-process.
So there's,
how do we communicate?
there's not that power differential. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that, a principal saying, and not that they probably had 15 tattletales that day, right? But if they had a legitimate concern or something that there's maybe not feeling like, well, run back out to recess, right? Instead of, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out if there's somewhere in there that Because it seems like right there would be where you'd want it, 'cause this is where the investigation and LEA shall investigate allegations of incidents by interviewing the student subjected to the incident, an individual who alleged to have engaged in prohibited conduct. Maybe there's something about it may include, may. Yeah.
I would also say, I wouldn't limit it to parents. They might have a counselor or somebody that they feel
So,
comfortable
A
with.
parent or another adult, something like that. Where would that sit?
60.
Yeah, that would be.
I'll be back.
But it does say that they're interviewing so I don't know if they're interviewing the parents separate. I don't, and maybe it's encompassing. If you guys look at that, maybe it's already available.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like we're there. I guess I think we're there. I guess I'm just highlighting that this is recent and it's really created some problems that it's gonna take something bigger to really figure out.
Another aspect of that also is, sometimes it's the teacher, the adult that's has an incident against them. And how are they represented and what's the power dynamic there when you're meeting with your
Right.
boss and these parents of the student and you're like, well, the student did this to me, there's also, you want representation as a teacher who's had that incident happen to them as well. So I get it.
Is that line 258? And you changing students, if it becomes more broad or more inclusive, an individual objected to the incident may request an advocate or parent to be with them during the interview.
Yes.
If I could chime in.
Yeah.
I'm Willie Chen, School Safety Data Analyst for the School Safety Center. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Deputy Norman. So I just want to remind you on the reporting side, the data that we collect at the USPE is UTREX, we collect only student data, right? So if the student bullied the teacher, as long as the admin is entering, we can collect that. But if it's like an employee on employee bullying aspect, we will not be able to report that as easily.
Student on teacher?
Student on teacher should
be reported.
Right, because it's happened to the student, right? So we collect the student side. But if a coworker is bullying another coworker,
Right.
that's actually more on
That's
HR.
right.
Kind of situation. So I just wanted to give y'all context. If you start changing language of like student subjected to, right, or employee subjected to, just as a reminder, this rule is mainly for when a student is causing if a student is causing the incident. So I just wanted to give that context.
I don't really need change. I don't need any changes, but I was more thinking like, if we want to put it in, we can reverse it and further prove your point, Emily, which is that like, it's important to have representation.
We could still put it there, students subjected to the.
It's got it in 261.
Oh, does
What
it?
if
It has both sides, the parents of both sides should be involved and interviewed.
There isn't sort of states in 1966.
What if it
Allows.
does that is that allowed during the interview process? I'm meaning does the parent get interviewed separate? Like, does that make sense, Michelle?
I think it follows what the school district or charter school's policy is, and I think it will also depend on the circumstance.
Yeah.
Just like Member Green said, some of them are, how do I handle the tattletale of the day? And do I need to call a parent in every time I'm doing that? And then asking a student, just like Member Green said, I think that there's a delicate balance here of at what point in time does the parent need to be there with the student? And at what point in time do I need to just inform the parent afterwards and then have the parent give me their input about how it's going to be handled? I'm not sure that it's something that we can put in black and white at what times.
I think, I've worked a lot in public safety and emergency management on college campuses. And every time we try and create if this happens and this happens, and it's like not one time does any incident ever fit into the same box. And so I think in the big picture, our goal here is to make sure that they're doing all these steps, mostly to cover, and protect our students, right? Protect our LEAs and to protect our students. And the reality is it's like there are so many different scenarios and things that could play out that really it's impossible to create a perfect if then this then that right scenario.
Could
board
we,
plan.
yeah, could we, and I'm just, now that she said that. So on line, right between line 267, 268, just add, so it would be a new C, and this is just a suggestion that we just add, a student may have a parent or advocate during their interview. I don't know if that. Is that, or if it's not necessary? I don't know, Michelle, what do you think?
I worry about saying that because then I think if someone's trying to live the letter of the law, how am I gonna handle the tattletales that come in that day? I have to call a parent every single time and I can't, it's
with
just
the
not
may?
realistic.
Even with the may in there? If it's a student may have a parent or.
Then is it up to the student to decide? If you say that to me, that means the student decides whether they want to have an advocate with them or not.
And actually, that brings up a really good point, because in some scenarios, it's like you are not to talk to school personnel unless there is an adult or your parent with you. And that's where some of that goes underground, because the power dynamics are there, and that student is not safe and has been and is not validated in the concern that they're bringing forward. So that's exactly what that is.
There's those times that you absolutely need the parent there, and then there's those times that it's not practical to make a solution immediately. So that's why it's hard for you to put it in here at what point in time the parent needs to be there. Because there are definite times that you need to give that option to the student, and there are definite times that you just need to be able to solve the problem at the moment that it's happening.
So on 2A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and forward, is that a step-by-step process the way it's laid out? Or are these the options that you can apply as it fits the situation?
It has 4, so you choose any of those that are in there. If you look at number 6, it has or. So those are not required in every single.
So it just depends on the incident, right?
Yes.
This just confirms that everybody needs the self-governance class.
Government.
Sorry.
Okay, well, there we go. I have no recommendations. I have a lot of questions. So
And I think those are valid, right? I mean, I think you even have that even with adults that report things, that there's that power differential, right? I mean, this is human nature. Or it's, someone that's over them is like, oh, I don't want that to show up on somewhere. That always kind of plays out. And we know that even with, when we get to the child abuse stuff, right? You have to report often more than once. So, it's either inexperience, lack of training, or, I mean, there's a variety of things, right? I had another question if you're done. I can't remember what it is, but give me just a second. I had,
While you're collecting your thoughts, if I could also add some additional context again. Vice Chair Green, Vice Chair Green, I don't know if this fully answers your concerns as well, but in the data side, the LEAs are still also supposed to report alleged incidences of bullying when it comes to the protected classes, such as sex, race, religion, gender, et cetera. So there will be those incidents reported. I think, like, as we were saying, we're just trying to minimize the tattletale scenarios, et cetera. So there will be that. And so I believe, again, probably towards LEA policy, with those more serious allegations, they will probably have that parent dynamic, or ideally they would have that parent dynamic involved in those more serious allegations.
Okay. Yeah. And I just want to also reiterate that that each LEA has their own policy as well. So remember that those are more detailed, and when a principal or an administrator has to do an investigation, depends heavily on that LEA's policy. So some of these details would be really difficult to put at the state level, but could be addressed at an LEA level.
Yeah. If there's that interview process that happens here, is that recorded? Is that required to be recorded? Is that attached to like their file so that's on record? Or, I know that's more paperwork. I'm just wondering if that's.
Not required to be like tape recorded.
Oh, no, I meant like a
Noted.
paperwork.
Oh, I thought it was two different. Wow, I never did that.
No, like documented. Thank you.
Is that documented? The LEA to say at what point in time. So just like we were talking earlier about, do I need to make a record in a student's file of every time someone alleged that and went and tattletaled on them? Do I need to document that in both students' files every single time? I think will depend on the LEA's policy of how serious it is before it needs to be recorded in the student's file.
If I could weigh in too, I would just say as a former principal, I think they still do this. You kept a log of all those interactions. And then if there was something that needed to be elevated, that would be a series of interviews and, parent intervention and all that kind of thing. It had to be pretty elevated to attach it to a student file, but you do keep a log so that you have that personal running track of what's happening with students and families when you're interviewing them and intervening. But it's high elevation to the student record because that moves along.
So, and I'm seeing this where those conversations had existed, never logged, and then it tipped. So, but now you're backtracking to put all the pieces together to create an investigation that needs to happen. So there's been a massive disconnect with this rule here. And it's not that the rule is at fault, it's that I'm just trying to communicate what the disconnects have been that have tipped an area into massive chaos. So, and I do think that, a parent being there interviewing with that child would have been helpful in clearing up, and not just one student, but many, the situation. So knowing that it's documented and that there's a log.
There should be, there should be a principle, but that's just standard practice.
Yeah, but again, I think we're then left to when does it become big enough to document and log, so. Can that interview be triggered or that investigation be triggered though? Like you can backtrack and have those interviews. It's not going to be just like pushed away or discredited.
You go backwards. Is that what you're saying? Yes. And I think that that's what Deputy Norman was saying. When you find that there's a pattern that comes up, then you can go back and say, I need to go back and look at these because this is being alleged more than one time. And so, yes, you definitely go back and relook at those allegations when you start to see a pattern.
Is there a way to put that into language then? So like if there's a pattern that's manifest, maybe it's in here. I don't know where to pin it, but if there's a pattern that's manifested and at that point, can that person be brought in with the student?
Can that person?
So can the parent be then with the student to work through that? How is? Go ahead. I'm sure.
Well, we were just talking about abusive conduct and how with the data side, you have to have more than one instance for it to qualify as abusive conduct. But that's something that we're actually going to meet with the data team on because we're struggling with, okay, well, the first instance wasn't documented because it was a singular instance.
Right.
But then when the second instance came about, then we have to go back and somehow record that. And so that's a conversation that we're going to be having.
That is a conversation I'm attempting to have right now. So how does that work then when that deeper dive can happen? And how is that going to affect this if we're going to pass this out? Do we have time to bring this back, improve it if we need to? Or, because I don't know that
I mean, it will come to the board in August is what I'm thinking. So if there is some, there could be additional.
If we make changes based on that meeting, we could we could send them to you all kind of preliminary. Is that okay?
Does that need to be a motion?
I think it'll be very big if we do make any changes, we're just making sure our definitions align. And more that the IT understands what our definitions are, right, that we're communicating.
Just as a, maybe a point of practice, I do know, so at one time I was a sixth grade teacher and doing mentoring type roles as well. And within that, the teachers created simpler ways of tracking incidents. And one is like a discipline book where a child would say, something's happening, and you'd say, do you want to go ahead and write that down? And they'd say, so who's involved? And the child could help fill it out. And they're like, okay, this is who was involved, but it's specific to them to be able to say it. And then say, do you want to meet with me at recess about that or not? And they're like, no, I just wanted to make sure I wrote it down. Or I want to just make sure that I, let my mom know, or whatever it is. And so that way you have that in the child's own writing to be able to say, yeah, this is what happened, this is who's involved, whatnot. But I'm okay, I just wanted to write it down. And so there's some really easy ways of tracking some of these things that doesn't involve a lot of time on the teachers behalf. And sometimes just having the child write it down, then they're okay. They're just like, okay, it's somewhere, and now I'm okay. I just had to write it down. And it gives them a chance to like debrief and relax while they're writing it down. So I know that there's some very simple ways of being able to do it. And that wouldn't be put in a rule, but I do know that there's systems that are in place.
I will say what you just said is exactly what I've been trying to get to. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's that it's escalated now, it's becoming a pattern. But now you're backtrack. It's kind of like when they're like, oh yeah, I can't hire you without a college degree. So you get a college degree. And they're like, well, we can't hire you because you don't have any experience. You're like, then you should hire me. I don't have experience. So this is where we are. It's that kind of, we're in limbo here. But I think it is a discussion we need to have, because there are situations where it is absolutely tipped out of control. And there are students that have no voice right now because of the patterns that have manifested. And I'm desperately trying to resolve that for them.
And some of those patterns are because people aren't following policies, right? And so that lends itself to training, once again, that you have to have a policy. You have to adhere to your policy. You can't make up special rules, or lack of experience, right? Sometimes that brings into it, so.
Okay, so I guess for the holder is that if there are changes, can we have a little bit of flexibility here? I guess it helps that we're coming back in
Well,
August.
it would be an amendment that we could move, right, in
Okay.
August.
I just didn't want to be tongue-tied, if there's information here that we could address that if there is a solution.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep you posted and have you aware of any suggested changes or potential changes before that.
And it would probably, correct me if I'm wrong, it would probably just come as another draft recommended by staff or something, right? Unless a board member, you put it out and a board member wanted to pick it up as their amendments. Am I maybe speaking?
Can I ask then, do we feel as a committee that we should come back to this in August?
I don't know.
And
are you looking at big changes, do you think?
No, I think that they would be very small. I honestly think more of it's going to be on the data side than it is in the rule. And I also worry just a little bit, Becca can answer better, the school policies, wanting to make sure that their policies are in place when the school year starts. So making sure that we have a rule for them at the beginning of August.
Especially with school safety stuff rolling out.
Right.
And all that.
Yeah, and Member Green, I'd be happy to follow up with you to talk about systems, to see what systems they have in place. To Dr. Norman's point, I think there are schools who have really good digital systems that help them record all of this, so they're not going back and backtracking. But happy to follow up with you to see if there's a way we can resolve that doesn't have to create an amendment that may not still solve that problem. So I'd be happy to talk with you offline about it.
Okay, I'm like, I could vote. I just don't want to be like, well, you voted it out of committee. So you're done now, but I don't want that to happen.
If we need to, we can halt it, but I don't know if we think it's going to be substantial.
I think where we're coming back in August, I'm okay. And we'll, okay.
See if it's a system or a policy issue. It sounds like it's more of a system issue.
I don't know.
So let's unpack it.
Sure. Okay. Let's do.
Okay, on line 145. First of all, it doesn't make sense, meaning the one above it is in addition to the requirements of subsection, an LEA shall language outlining response to students. So it's gotta be create language. Yes.
145 starts with language outline.
Yeah, it probably needs something like create language, or it's gotta, something it's gotta do, but it's language outlining response to students who share a recording of an act of bullying, cyberbullying, hazing, abusive conduct, and retaliation in order to impact or encourage future incidents. So let me understand. So if a student posts something that there was an incident and then it leads to additional incidents? Is that what it's saying?
So this is from statute. This is a new piece
Yeah.
as well. And I believe, if I can understand the law correctly, that it was about posting things online.
Right,
with the
recording a fight, right?
And then the intent of making more of an issue, right? Of creating more disruption to the school environment, right? Not just recording it for their personal use or to make sure that, the victim receives justice or whatever it may be, but with the intent of, and so I'm trying to get that language in there. So yes, it does need to be changed grammatically, but if there's anything you want to change,
It just needs a verb to be, include language.
Right, it's an interesting thing. Who weighs in on this and makes the decision if something with the intent? Yeah, because is it pretty clear, the intent? I mean, it may be with teenagers, I don't know, but do you know what I'm saying? Because then you're into some interesting legal kind of stuff. I mean, we had this debate yesterday, right, on bells and whistles or whatever, but.
If I may,
yeah.
the original language of the bill did say the intent, and I brought up that that's really hard thing for an administrator to determine the intent of the student for recording. And so then it was subsequently changed to in order to impact or encourage future incidents. So I think we want to stay away from intent, that word, because even after an investigation, it's super hard for an administrator to say, oh, this student intended to use this to cause.
You're having to make a direct,
right,
and that, which is good. That's okay. I just was trying to understand what the parameters were around this.
I also do want to highlight, this is so kind of like what Elise was saying at the beginning of the meeting, where we're kind of with like the definitions in law and how we're kind of strapped with that. Bullying, the definition in law is a school employee or student intentionally committing a written ... And so that's something that comes up often where determining intent is just so difficult for LEAs, but that is the definition in code.
Okay, we just need a verb. What verb do you want?
Any verb.
Create? I don't know, whatever. What's the best verb there?
Include. I'll include.
Yeah.
Include it in the motion.
Okay.
I think this process, the writing process, the work that you do in preparation for these meetings, these conversations, I think parents would be so relieved to know that these kinds of difficult conversations are going on behind the scenes to protect their kids. It's pretty, as tough as it is to sit through all of these meetings and to rewrite and to redo, it is so good for our kids and so much better for the system. Thank you for all of that work and for this conversation.
Do we need to make a motion on the create, or is that kind of we can, or not create, include, right? Is that what you decided?
Yeah, let's do.
All right, so I make a motion that we add include to the beginning of line 145 on draft 3. Okay, I'll read that. That the committee amend draft 3 line. Oh, okay, sure. That the committee amend draft 3 line 145 to add the word include at the beginning of the line.
Okay, we have a motion that the committee amend draft 3 line 145 to add the word include at the beginning of the line. Any further discussion? Seeing any, let's vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have 4 saying aye. That must be all of us.
Okay, I'll make a motion for the document. I go back. What's our motion? Motion is that the committee approves R277613 draft 3 on first reading as draft 3 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay,
And then we'll just add the little star, which we won't make part of the motion, that there's probably there could be some additional language, right? And will that just get sent to this?
I'll send it out to the four of you, just so that you're aware if there are any things and just catch you up on the conversation so that you're abreast of the situation.
Thank you.
okay, we have a motion that the committee approves R277613 draft 3 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any further questions or discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was 4 ayes, unanimous. Thank you very much to all of you. We happen to have a couple more things to do here. We're not running out of items. All right, we're on action item 1.7. This is R277630, child sex abuse, human trafficking, prevention, training, and instruction amendments. So Tanya, taking the hot seat.
Elise is gonna kick us off.
Oh, okay, Elise. Go for it.
My pleasure. So if you recall, there was a bill this last session having to do with the child abuse and trafficking training that happens in schools. One of the big changes is that it creates a primary state provider that will provide a lot more training to schools throughout the state, but then also created a possibility for a school to choose to have an alternative provider, and then a grant program that they can then apply for funds in order to pay for that alternative provider that they chose. And so this rule was expanded quite a bit. There's a new section for definitions. We didn't have definitions before, so that's new. And then there's a section for each of those different components. So how to become the primary provider, how to become an alternative provider, and then how a school would apply for the funds in order to pay for the alternative provider.
Yes, I just want to add, Tanya Alberno's coordinator for prevention and student services. I wanted to add that we did change terms a little bit to make it clear that a provider is someone who submits material or curriculum to the board for approval to be used in schools. And in the rule, we changed the statewide provider who will have the contract to provide the training in schools we're calling them the statewide contractor, and the alternative contractor, right? Or am I mixing that up? I was on vacation. Okay. Sorry. Something happened while I was on vacation.
So there were I apologize, this is my fault. Angie and I had a conversation about this because it was tricky because our original rule said provider was anyone who submitted their materials to be approved by the state. That was a provider, correct?
Yes.
But then in the new code, it also uses the word provider as the person who can provide these materials to the entire state. So there's a little bit of conflicting. Angie's opinion, and this could be a decision of this committee, was that we should be using the same language that's in the code, even if it is a little bit confusing, because we should have fidelity to that, but that can be a decision made amongst this committee. It is confusing to read.
And it's confusing for us. So our recommendation was that we use two different terms to distinguish, but I mean, I'll defer to Deputy Superintendent.
The primary provider for the state level.
So there's primary providers, alternative provider, and then just provider.
Capital P, lowercase p. Correct.
Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah. I'll never go on vacation.
Wait, so what is the alternative provider then? Versus the provider.
So as Elise stated, there's a statewide provider that.
Yeah, that's the primary.
Right, and then what we have is some situations where LEAs already have relationships with organizations and they didn't want to lose those. So an alternative provider is somebody who is still approved by the board. Their material is still approved, but they're not the statewide provider, meaning they're not the provider that has the contract.
Okay.
There's somebody else that the LEA that's approved that the LEA wants to continue to utilize. So there's the $500,000 grant that they can apply for to pay for those services.
Okay.
That's not clear.
Well, I think I followed it. I just want to make sure I understood fully. So do you want me to start asking questions? I think, if you go to line 660, where it says 6, there's a code reference, and I think it needs to be 82A, not 4A. It's not 4A section. It's just in the parents' rights section. So it needs to be 80. It's just, that's probably just a clerical error. Do you want to look it up?
Yeah, thank you.
2A.
Okay, so opening, which line was that?
63.
63, okay.
I think the other takes should like childcare, or not childcare, like foster or something. Okay, and this is my recommendation. What you have 6A, which is the training expectations. So that's things people are being trained on. What you have in B is the required program concepts. Okay, and I would recommend that on A, you leave 1. I'm trying to, some of it, because we don't want to spell out things that are in the law already. That's where I'm like, some of these are duplications and it's just the reference of the law. This is not it. Hold on. The wrong one. Sorry, just 1 second.
There isn't a 4A. 4A.
Let's see, so in the law itself, 53G 92073, an LEA shall provide, and it says that it lists off A, B, and C. It would seem to me that we could strike the 2, the 3, the 4, and just reference 53G 9207. And this is what it says here. It says, respond to disclosure of student sex abuse in supportive, appropriate manner. Identify students are victims or may be at risk of becoming victims of human trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation. And then the mandatory. So it hits the various students that are at risk, the mandatory requirements, and then it hits responding to how to disclose disclosure child sexual abuse in a supportive, appropriate manner. And I think we could just reference that as a 2. Like, does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so on 64, strike 64, 65, 66, 67, because those are encompassed in the law, and we would just reference the law there. So it's the provisions in the law. So 53G 9207.
They're direct quotes from the statute. And we should
Yeah.
just refer to the
Yeah,
statute.
that's why it's right. That's our practice, not to restate statute.
Will you start on that one again? So we just say
Yep.
who's typing what you're saying. So
Okay, so strike 63 through 68.
I thought it was 64.
Specialized. Yeah, sorry, 64. You're right. Sorry, I just looked up where it started. 64, and then you would just put 53G 9207-3. Parentheses 3. Did you let me go slower on that? 207-3, because those are the actual provisions in the law that are listed there.
What's the code again? Can you say the code again?
Yeah, 53G 9207, and then parentheses 3.
Okay.
Okay, and then I would move up under the program, this was complicated last time. So when we vetted materials that came to us, there were definitions that we were teaching kids that were actually questionably in violation of the law because we had to do it. If that makes sense, like it was, so I would move those definitions, like a definition for human trafficking, sex trafficking definition, labor trafficking definition, and grooming cycle up to, so B 1, 2, 3, 4, I would move those up to the training that takes place for the adults. So those definitions are included in the training that takes place for the adults. So there's not a question if we're trying to tell third graders, we're trying to define sex trafficking for them.
So you would start with 5 instead then?
Yeah. Yep. And then we can just see if this works when I'm done. This is just my ideas, and then you can say, no, it doesn't work, Jenny. Then what I would reference under B is I would put I as age-appropriate instructional materials as described in 53G 9207. And that covers responsibility of adults for the safety of children, how to recognize uncomfortable feelings, how to say no, clear boundaries, the importance of discussing uncomfortable situations with parents and other trusted adults. And then under age-appropriate instructional materials, it says it can't include inviting students to share personal experiences. It can't include instruction on consent as outlined in the law, and it gives the reference law there. So we don't have to write all that down. Does that make sense? We just reference what that is. So we're not having to.
So Vice Chair, I'll just.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's reference under B, I as age appropriate instructional materials, and then there was a finishing on that sentence.
As directed, as described in 53G 9207.
We did define age-appropriate instruction materials at the top.
But this is under the program requirement. So you just have to say age appropriate. Okay, that's up here. Yes.
Board Member Earl, I think everything is in this list is because one thing that people are not aware of is that this is inclusive of adult serving youth, parent and guardian, and student curriculum. So we have a charge that we have a requirement that LEAs provide training to what we call adult serving youth, which is all educators, right? And for parents and guardians, those two are required. And then they have the option of providing training to students if the LEA chooses. And so I think this
is there any way to separate those out? I thought it was only adult serving youth.
No.
And okay. I guess I must have read the law weird.
Right.
Well,
So I think this list is inclusive of all three of those, and that's why. And I'm understanding your question is like, can we rewrite this?
Can we separate that from the program then? Does that make sense from not the training? We don't want to do it's not the train. I see what
you see what I'm saying. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think it would require us to do a more comprehensive rewrite of this rule.
Yeah. To separate it out.
Yeah.
And you may have, when I was going to the restroom, you may have already answered this, but how many providers are there out there that teach that? Was there basically the background of the law was that it felt like they were expanding the amount of providers that provide training? How many are there out there and how many do we contract with?
We don't contract with it.
I mean, do the LEAs contract, whatever, because it does say like a big part of that is expanding the
number of providers.
Was it really narrowed?
So it depends on if your question is how many providers do we have that train on adult serving youth? How many do we have that train on parent guardians? How many do you have that train on train students? So like we have all three of those, and within all three of those you have child sex abuse and human trafficking.
Right,
so there's a total of 6.
Just forget that I asked a question. So now
So
it was good for them to make it more broad.
Whoever's driving right now, we have on our prevention website the list of approved providers and who is approved to provide which training.
Okay.
So this one is parents and guardians. This one would be for students.
So yeah. So I'm sorry.
I just that was like it seemed like a big piece of the law that the change.
If you go to the overview page, I'm sorry, Patty, if you go to the overview page and scroll down, right there.
Oh, got it.
Is the list
USBE approved providers for child sex abuse and human trafficking prevention. Oh, scroll up. It's right there in the middle. Oh, okay. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Hold up.
Okay.
So I will tell you that currently, when we have one provider, if we're talking about students, because that's what this rule is really directed at. If we're talking about students, there is only one provider that is authorized to provide both child sex abuse and human trafficking for students.
Okay, that's, I guess.
There are others who are approved to do one or the other.
That
So
was leading to the changes that you were thinking about making.
Yeah.
Tying that to the provider, because if they don't, if we leave them all, I don't know. I just want to make sure that we're not narrowing it or changing in a way that then there's no providers for either of those things for all three of the groups.
The problem is that, and this is, I mean, I went back to my notes from when, back in 2022, the provider that was approved by the board, not by a majority vote, I didn't, there were things in there that they put in there because of the way we have the language written in here that were concerning. So that's what I'm trying, yeah.
The rule wasn't, we didn't have a rule at that point.
So we had oh, that's right. Did this change the rubric then? This is changing the rubric. That's right. We put the rule in after the. Does it fix things? That's what well, I can give you examples, but okay, so what do you want to do?
That's why, I mean, there's a trick here because it's like we have to find providers and we have to make sure that what's in this rule, providers probably will, if they want to contract with us, will be like, well, we can teach that too, right? They can fix it, but if there's three different groups that we're needing to three different groups that are receiving training and different contractors for two pieces, both sections. Well, I don't know the
trainings. It's the program rollout that I'm concerned about.
Would it be an exclusionary type language, which is ensuring that these definitions are not in the student materials, something like that, so that it's like.
It could be. Like we make a note that's like,
well, age appropriate, that kind of covers that, I guess.
Well, it doesn't though, because if you had to them, they have to define a term and use the term. Define sex trafficking to a third grader.
Yeah.
Right, and when they're using the whatever definition we put out, which we have, that's the definition. They're like, we don't want to stray from the definition, right? Because then they're in legal hot water. So they're going to use whatever that is, whether that's age appropriate or not. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense.
So an option might be we pause this conversation and give
do we have a little time?
The reason this is time sensitive a little bit is because we need to put the RFP out for the statewide provider, and then we need to put out the grant for LEAs. But if you want us to try to rewrite the rule with those clarifications, I'm happy to do that and bring it back in August.
Okay.
But the question on well, I'm probably jumping, so I'll wait.
I'm sorry for the work, but I think that would be a good thing to do.
I think it would. And I guess, I mean, technically we could, if it were done in the next couple of weeks, we could probably have a meeting. I don't know why not, right? People are busy, but I mean, we could if it's beneficial so that it can get done for, improved in August instead of September, October. So, yeah, I just feel like it needs to be a little cleaner for me. I mean, I've got my suggestion, but I see where you're coming from. You still want certain things included in the training. It's just the programming piece. I don't want to get lost to where we're including things that really just shouldn't be there.
And one other thing that to make you aware of is that we are currently in the process of updating and revising those minimum guidelines that are used in the rubrics.
Yeah.
we're on a timeline to revise those.
So that's why I'm saying, let's get in the rubric, what we want in the rubric. That's what the intent was, to try to remove things that were already in law, so we weren't duplicating them, and then, yeah.
This may be a crazy idea. Would it be possible if we passed sections, because we can break it up, can't we? Into section, and we pass through subsections 4, 5, and 6 so that we can get the RFP process going. And then we hold on subsection 2 and 3.
Right, because that language is also language that was in the existing rule that we didn't really touch for these changes. So.
And then we could bring subsections 2 and 3 to, I mean, we could do a special session, or we could do it in our committee in August. And have that language for you, but that way there's no delay on.
But if we approve it here, doesn't it have to, just correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't it have to still go through board before we can start the next process, the RFP?
Yeah, so it'll just be ready to go for the board, and then if we get the other parts finished before August board meeting, then we can do the whole rule, but then we just don't have to.
Okay, which sections did you say you wanted to pass?
4, 5, and 6. New sections, which are 4, 5, and 6.
And 2, right, definitions. Because you need those in order to do 4, 5, and 6. Are the definitions in there?
We wouldn't do 2 today. We would just have you approve section 4, 5, and 6, and then Elise and I would work on sections 1 and 2.
Okay.
Let's bring those back to you.
How does, let's see, try to figure this out. How does the CSA youth attachment tie in with the draft?
Can you?
I'm on.
Oh, and back up.
Oh, sorry, I jumped. But if we're taking a vote, I have to know how these tie into it.
Will you say which one again?
It's the CSA youth.
Okay. Let me
Which
just
one
down
did she want
this to
to
make
make
sure that I know what it
CSA
is. These were the minimum guidelines that were approved by the board that I just stated we're in the process of updating.
So this is a K through 6.
This is the minimum expectations that a provider has to meet in their materials in order to be approved by the board.
So, okay, I want to read this out loud then. Page 5 of 5 on the CSA youth.
Yes.
And healthy sexual development. I just want to.
Before you go there, I just want to make clear that this page, it says, is used as a reference for adults only and for those that are scoring the curriculum. This is not a document that is incorporated into materials in any way. It's just if a scorer is reviewing materials that are submitted to us for approval, and the scorer, one of the scorers or the review committee is like, what is age appropriate, or what is healthy sexual development? This was a reference page that was put in. So it's not an official part of the rubric. It was just there for the reviewer's reference.
But the reviewer, if aligned with the following, could approve a curriculum that would say that
We approve the curriculum.
we approve that a 5 to 8-year-old may engage in consensual genital exploration with the same age and often same-sex peers.
They actually
may
struck
understand
that both of
differences.
those.
Yeah, I just want to also add that at the board's direction, we took that page off for this round of materials that were submitted, and it wasn't included in the rubric that was used by the reviewers.
But where would a rubric like this come from? I mean, if we're gonna have a rubric, and I'm not attacking you, we're gonna do a hard conversation right now. If we have defined grooming in this rule, this law, and then we say under big bold letters that some of the following items are
Normal
healthy
behavior.
sexual development, that is an absolute blatant contradiction.
I understand the concern, and just in full disclosure, this rubric was put together prior to me being the coordinator, so I can't really tell you.
And I'm not yelling at you. I'm kind of yelling at the universe right now,
which is
because
why
the contradiction around this
Which
is
is why I'm
just
saying
suffocating.
we're in the process of updating it, because it was brought to our attention in 2022. And And so like at my direction at that time, we removed this page because again, it's just a reference. I'm not sure where this came from. I am aware that these guidelines were put together by a very large group of stakeholders who were interested in this, which included, you know, the AG's task force on human trafficking. It included professionals and others from the community. Just a whole lot of people were involved. And then it did go through the board for approval at that time. So
what is the rubric then? Because we have this one for, you know,
pages 1 through 4.
Is the current rubric.
the problem that I see though is that then what becomes the healthy sexual development rubric? Where is that age appropriate instead?
Yeah, so when this current statute passed, this last section, there was a definition of age appropriate in there. And so while we're updating the minimum guidelines, we will incorporate that definition into the minimum guidelines and to make sure that that's what's used as the reference for the review committee.
And if I'm understanding what you're saying, then you'll be using that in place of the other will not be there, right? And the other problem with the other item is it's not, there's no research, it's not attached to, and I think that goes along with Emily's question is,
well, it's also not,
who decided
it's also a conflict statute.
Yeah, it is direct conflict, so.
Well, and I think that's my question too, is my pushback here is there's research for any argument you want to make now. You know, the Kinsey Institute focuses on sexual, subjects like this, and they absolutely align with the 0 to 2-year-old all the way up to the 12-year-old things here on this document. So, and you can counteract that with a whole other set of research about masturbation as it references here, and at what age and how much and how often, and does it become addicting, and what does it lead, other things that it leads to, and taking grooming and putting it in. This is heavy, and I know that we all feel that. It's just, where is our research coming from? Because you can justify that this is researched, but it's researched through, areas that believe that all of these things are okay. And there's another body of research that says, actually, some of these things unchecked, groomed and fed to and introduced to young minds at a young age, has detrimental effects. So, even some of these things it's like that I'm okay with on this list, I don't want a teacher telling. We have those conversations.
What I can offer you is that once the minimum expectations are updated, the plan was to come to the board for approval for those. So
are you saying those might be done by the end of June? Or may take a little longer.
My specialist is out right now.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe by.
I'm hoping by August, September at the latest.
Okay.
How can we help give productive feedback beforehand?
I'm happy to include a board member on that committee. We plan to hold a couple of meetings. We've invited experts from the field to come give us, people who are knowledgeable in this area, that work in this area, and that have expertise to come and provide us feedback. And I'm also happy to include a board member in those conversations if we need to.
That'd be board leadership to decide who would be the board member to represent on the committee.
And of course, as we know, we're talking about sex trafficking and child sex abuse, so it's really hard to not talk about some things and just knowing the line of who's the one having the discussion. But these are topics that are going to happen within this realm of if we want to prevent these things. So understanding behaviors often includes things that make folks uncomfortable.
Yeah, but there's a difference between that and research that's not accurate.
Well, right, for sure. But I mean, you can't talk about sex abuse and sex trafficking without talking about a lot of these things.
Right. And is there a way, because children can't tell the difference, even teenagers can't tell the difference between sex trafficking and sex abuse, right? There's not really, is there a difference? There is a difference. We know that there is, but there's not. right?
with you.
Yeah. You don't have, yeah.
What, I mean, what I would say is that sex trafficking is a subset of child abuse.
Yes.
So like, it would be a part of inside the circle of
Right.
of child abuse. And then inside the circle of sex abuse. Does that make sense?
But yes, but when you're teaching children to protect themselves, we don't differentiate between the two because they really to try to explain
That's correct.
one from the other, right?
It's about having healthy boundaries and
That's right.
using your words.
Yeah, it's the same thing for both, right? It's the same.
So I guess here's where's my dissonance here is that we're up on page 2 where it talks about groomer tactics, right? Fake trustworthiness, pretending to be the youth's friend in order to gain their trust, or testing boundaries, jokes, roughhousing, back rubs, tickling, sexualized games, touch. From regular, mostly comfortable, non-sexual touch to accidental touch of private parts, often over time. And then you put that, bat that up against what they have listed. And I know it's not there anymore, but this exists still in our day right now. Very, very prevalent and leading beliefs around healthy sexual development. Then you have, you're back to may touch themselves or appear to be masturbating, usually used as self-soothing technique. You can have adults, teachers that do believe that masturbation is a self-soothing technique and that should not be withheld from 2 to 5-year-olds. And then you have abusers that could say child on child porn. So say they dive into that realm and they say it's okay because they do it in a way that is
You're saying they could use content to
because they're
justify.
testing boundaries, and we've normalized that sexual behavior under that title, normal sexual behavior. Yet those very things are the things that are presented through fake trustworthiness and testing boundaries, touch, intimidation, and so forth. So I'm just saying there is a massive contradiction in what this law requires us to do. It's very, very, boy, we opened a can of worms with this one. We're gonna have to ask some hard questions and really think about what it is that we are going to be justifying as healthy sexual development. And
if I'm understanding, that's not even gonna be on there, right?
It's not there currently.
It's not there currently.
But I'm saying those belief systems are in curriculums, and these conversations, just like Member Rill said, will be required.
And the only reason why I'm pushing back, just not really, because you're right, that's out there, is I do think that the current language that it was passed in law with age appropriateness and actually put parameters around that for once, because it used to be age appropriateness, which really meant anything, right? And that's why it was defined as whatever you can pick up. And the parameters, just read the parameters, which are the responsibility is actually adults to keep students safe.
Underneath the adult that believes in this,
Right.
healthy sexual development is not a safe adult.
And
so how are we gonna
I think one thing is this was the wrong rubric that was uploaded. This one should not have been uploaded. We don't use it anymore.
I understand.
I just want to make that clear to everyone,
Yes,
the public and
the
everyone, that
public,
this was not the one we're using now.
It's not, it was in 2022, it's
Yeah.
not now. It could go underground. I'm saying it could go underground. This is what this conversation tips its toe into. This is the realm right here that we are going into right now. We have to. We have to acknowledge that some of the curriculums, the rubrics, the belief systems, the research now tips into exactly what this says. So I'm just saying, so let's be aware of it.
If it helps, curriculum has to come back to the board for approval every 3 years. And so what would happen is if there happens to be anyone out there that is not in alignment with current statute, it will come back to the board eventually. I don't think that there's any, I don't think that's the case for any of them, but what I'm saying is there's a safeguard in place so that it would come back for review. And then if they have those concepts integrated in and it's not acceptable, then it just wouldn't be approved by the board for use in schools, if that helps.
Does this,
Let's see. Reference for adults only and for evaluators to ensure the curriculum considered is age appropriate. And I guess maybe have we defined then somewhere formally what age appropriate is?
Yes, that's what I was just going with.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can hit that again. It's the adults are responsible for the safety of children. How to recognize uncomfortable inner feelings, how to say no if you want to, it's 53G 10 or 9207. How to set clear boundaries and the importance of discussing uncomfortable situations with parents and other trusted adults. And then it's not inviting to share experiences, give instruction regarding consent. It can't include consent language in there, and then includes sexually explicit language or depictions. So that's putting some parameters around where there was nothing before. So, and then we can ask those questions too when the content comes up to us. Because that's what happened before, is that the actual curriculum before it was approved came to the board itself for that.
And in the big picture, the idea here is that we're equipping our adults and parents, and parents with tools and resources to identify these type of things, but also to understand what themselves shouldn't be doing, right? But the part that maybe you feel a little bit of worry about is, what are the students learning? Is that?
Well, maybe, and I think if I'm interpreting it, is what is the information we're giving adults that would be reflective on the teaching for students, right? To make sure that it doesn't fall into that line of.
Is there a direct line there, or are we just, it's because part of it is, I mean, there's obviously something like we need to inform children, like if an adult is doing this to you, like this is not okay, right? These are things that are not okay, but we also, so there's that piece of it, but then there's also adults in the world that engage with children. These things are not okay, and here are things you need to look for that may be potentially a child that is experiencing child abuse, right? So
I guess, see, yeah, and on that, I guess that's where
I just don't know if we can draw a direct line. It's like, if we're educating adults about these things, that means the students are gonna hear about them.
I guess that's what I'm saying is like, the contradiction is though, if we're normalizing sexual development that contradicts what we're saying an adult could do or another peer could do to them. I mean, our kids that's gonna be terrible.
Yeah, it's a contradictory message, right?
Yeah, it's
You're saying
contradictory. It's okay if you are doing all of these things, but not okay if an adult or somebody else is doing it to you. There's just.
I think that's why it was taken off. So that's the exact reason why that entire page is not there. So to your point, it was there at one time. It's no longer there. And so I also think that part of this is not only, I like your reference there, Board Member Real, when you're saying, you know, if an adult learns this, does it impact the child? Like, are they going to learn about this as well? And so I think that's something that we really need to be clear of in any of these training issues, training going forward, which is you might have this information at a much more micro level, but the student should only be aware of this level, but you need to know more so that you can help and benefit, but the child does not need to have access to this information, nor should they. Like, that's a no. It's a, may not have access to that from yesterday, may not have access to this information type. Right. That's moving forward. And so to that point, I'm wondering what part would need to be in the training and instruction that says that a may not, maybe I was talking about that before. It's like, is there exclusionary language to be able to say, here are the things for adults, but here are the may nots for the youth materials.
And I mean, as an adult or a parent, it's understanding a lot of the things like body behaviors and things that kids do. Like, is this weird that my kid is doing it at this age, or is it totally normal in their development, right? Like, some of those are really useful for parents and adults to understand when they're talking to kids about and being open about, like, this is something that's happening to you, or you may be feeling this way, right? All of those conversations are really good to have, and that's training that's really important for parents to have. And it all ties back to, this is not appropriate, which is what the purpose of this law is, to make sure that we are
putting things in place, training and prevention to stop child abuse.
Well, and
Child sex abuse, not,
but also
All of
hopefully,
it,
yes.
The Venn diagram.
Yes, yeah.
I think also too, we are in a complicated space too, because there is, this, I would say sexual revolution that we are seeing where areas that we're kind of had some lines there are being blended together. And still our youth are definitely faced with some contradictory messaging, because in that realm, those different areas are erased, blended, disappear, yet we're also wanting protections. So our youth are in a very vulnerable place right now where the messaging crosses all the time. I don't know that I actually see this working in any way in what we're saying we're trying to do, because the messaging that they're getting everywhere is the complete opposite. And I think we have to consider that as well as we develop this. That is the reality.
I mean, if I could go back and change the law, I would not put all of this on our school system.
Yeah.
It's like, this is totally unrealistic and feels very outside of the realm. It's like, parents are required to go through this training before they,
Actually,
like.
it's not a may. I mean, it's not a shall, it is a may. It is optional.
No, I say outside of school. Like,
Oh, yeah,
I don't like that this is all placed on LEAs to do. Like, LEAs should not be responsible for managing adults and their behaviors with children and how they treat them, right? Or how they talk to their kids about sex. Like, but they're placing a lot of this burden on us to try and make sure that we're preventing child sex abuse. And that's a huge burden to take on for our system, right? And it's a huge thing to navigate within our system because there are different parents that are okay with things and not okay with things. So for me, in the big picture, it's unfortunate that this burden has been placed on our system.
Well, I think it speaks to a dialogue though that has been rampant in our culture for a while, that parents are weak, parents don't know right from wrong, and parents that are strong and parents that have decided what's right and wrong are called bigoted and closed-minded and vilified in this realm. And so now
we're making teachers do it,
right? Now those lines have been, like they've crumbled around us. And so now we're seeing problems. So now we're going to address it through the law, when if we can keep some basic, societal structures in place where responsibility falls on parents,
right,
we could probably hold things together a little bit better than what we're told.
Right. Exactly.
If you're not critically thinking and challenging and pushing back dialogue all the time, we'd probably be okay.
And it should just be the parents,
I do think, just in response to this whole conversation, that I am really hopeful about this particular rule and the way that the law was structured, so that we have a statewide primary provider who is somebody or a group that is really in the weeds about all of these nuances and all of the most up-to-date information, and can provide that so that schools don't have to. It doesn't have to be the responsibility of the teacher, that it's paid for outside of the LEA funds, and that teachers don't have to know all of this stuff, but that somebody who does this for a living is going to come into our schools and help our kids with that. So I do think I'm in agreement 100% with everything, but I am grateful for this.
$1.5 million to stop sex abuse in the state of Utah. I mean, it's okay. Yeah, I agree though. It's just like.
And it is just that, right? If it's age appropriately delivered, for those that choose to participate,
Right.
it's schools can choose, but the parents also, they have to notify parents. Parents can come in and review curriculum. So there is that mechanism. They can attend, or they can have their child not attend, which if you've had a child sometimes that's had it in abuse, you don't want them necessarily. This could be a triggering thing. It's not, it's that really sensitive piece to make sure parents are aware of what's going on, because you don't want something to be escalated, or that real trauma, right? To reoccur. So it's making sure that there's a clear communication so that, it can be
I guess I think the biggest thing that I'm not, anyway, that we can continue to develop is just how that curriculum, like what is the rubric for that curriculum? Because you will be battling against two very different research bases. You have access to any research that you want. And so how can we as a committee or a board stay on top of this, you know, as far as what that rubric would look like? If it's not this one, what is it? And it's the law. What do we have right now?
No, so again, the pages 1 through 4 of that backup document is what the current rubric is based off of. Only pages 1 through 4. And we're in the process of updating those minimum guidelines right now. And that's the committee that I was saying, like.
Pages 1 through 4.
Correct. Yeah. We are happy to include a board member at board leadership's direction in that process. And we will be bringing those minimum guidelines to the board for approval. And then the rubric will be based off those minimum guidelines.
As long as we can somehow communicate that out to people in the state, because that's our, like this lunch thing that we've been dealing with, where this Provo School District was still going by the number of hours required of instruction, even though how many years ago did we do away with that requirement? But they absolutely would not bend for 5 minutes for seat time for lunch because they were required to do, we are required by the state to have this many hours. And I said, well, I don't
Training. I think the difference, and I appreciate what Elise said, because I think the difference in, I mean, even the bill that was passed this year was to create a provider that knew what was going on, knew, you know what I mean, and wasn't into the, like you're saying, that secondary or that other philosophical view, but was staying within the protective areas. So, okay, so what's the best, so can we pass sections 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6?
4, 5, and 6.
And those are just with the provider pieces,
Yeah,
right? And then if we get everything together, we could meet again prior to the next board meeting.
1, 2.
And if,
So do you want to make the motion that you pass that the board pass?
yeah, let me
4,
just
5, and
look at
6,
4,
and
5,
then
and
send it back to committee to look at
yeah.
1 and 2. I'm just
And do
giving
we
you a
need to make a
suggestion,
motion? Yeah,
kind of asking you, is this kind of what you want to do? Not
Yeah.
telling you.
I would not like to be that person.
Okay, well, I think we know who that person's going to be. Because you just raised your hand, Emily.
So we want to.
Okay, so should we do that? Should we do that?
Yeah, just give me 1 second to look down 4, 5, and 6, and see if I had any other questions. This is just setting up the framework for the providers,
So
right?
that they can do the RFPs.
I'm just trying to remember.
Greg was here.
And he's gonna be doing that. So
Yeah.
it's curriculum overview. Okay, so we don't have to worry about it. Particularly agenda solid.
Joanne.
Rule to committee.
If we get to it.
Okay, but it's not, it's in section.
Sure, yes. It's not 6.
I don't know.
Just a suggestion. Just
Okay.
kind of.
Oh, sorry, I'm hugging all their.
So that's already to grant.
Okay, so I'm happy to make that motion. I'm sure we.
Do you want to scroll down? Andrew?
So what?
Scroll
Okay,
down.
so
Scroll down.
do you want me to make a motion on it then?
You want to do it after all this?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
So
Can
in
you
sections
for your info?
4, 5, and 6. They've got
5 and 6, okay. Okay, I move that the committee approves R277-630, draft 1, sections 4, 5, 6 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading, and return the rule to committee to address sections 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. We have a motion that the committee approves R277-630, draft 1, sections 4, 5, and 6 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. And return the rule to committee to address sections 1, 2, and 3. Any question or discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No, I'm sorry, I forgot to say aye.
You're a no. Okay, so we have 3
Member Green is a no.
for approving and Vice Chair Green is no. Okay.
And then we need to make we don't need to make we could just request. Do we need to make a motion?
I don't know.
We put someone on the committee? The group that you're working with?
Is that a board leadership decision? I think
We
that
stated
you would recommend a board leadership, like select someone, assign
Yeah.
someone.
So can that just be a request or is it?
You can just do that as a request to leadership.
Okay, so I don't need to do a motion for that.
So
Okay.
We want it in the minutes. Or this
All right, so I think we're ready to go to, thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, and I think we're gonna clear up why the board leadership was like that board member should not have voted it. So
Let's get it out of there.
we'll correct that. What do we call that committee? So we can put it in the notes.
Hang on one second.
Say, we need to revise the minimum guidelines.
Okay.
Minimum guideline revision.
A board member. To
All right, we're ready to move on to 1.8. Education Interim Committee Sunset Items, Section 53.5 to 19. Local Innovations Civics Education Pilot Program. We've got Greg. Take it away.
Thank you. I stopped sharing, so you should be able to share.
Thank you for letting us present. We're presenting on some sunset recommendations that are coming up for the legislature. This first one's the local innovations and our only one, local innovation civic education pilot program. This is Utah Code 53F-5-219. I'm Greg Cannell, policy analyst, and we have Robert Austin with us as well.
Welcome. I'm Robert, the Humanities Team Coordinator. Great.
So this particular part of code, it set up a pilot program for 3 years to provide some funding and allows schools and LEAs to teach civics education, promote responsibility for defending the Constitution, confidence in the foundations of America, taught American civic and political institutions, and help students develop skills, character traits, and to be productive and thoughtful in their civic life. Since this was a 3-year pilot program, we're at the 3rd year, and so it's up to be sunsetted or repealed. There's a little bit of options that the board has. The legislature is seeking our recommendation for this. So there's really 3 things we can do. We can take no action. This would allow the statute to sunset as it was scheduled, meaning that the pilot program and the part code would be repealed July 1st, 2025. We could draft a committee bill to change the sunset date, or we could draft one to remove the sunset date entirely. And they are looking for a recommendation from our board. Our recommendation is that we don't sunset this part of code and backup. We had it originally a little bit different, but upon further research, we found that there needs to be a little more time to determine how this program can be effective in LEAs. And one of the main reasons is all the funds have been encumbered to LEAs. They've been distributed. However, all these LEAs are at different parts of implementing their programs for this pilot program, and there's just not enough information for us at this point in time due to the varying level of where these schools are in their implementation of those programs to know whether or not this is a good program or how it's all going to shake out. And so we prefer that there'd be more time given to this program and that this sunset be extended so LEAs can have more time and the USB can continue to help with that program's implementation.
How long would you want to hold out the sunset for?
I'll ask Robert.
Yeah, I mean, 2 more years would be great. I mean, a lot of pilot programs are 5-year pilots. This is a 3-year pilot, but with that, I think we could really encourage the full expenditure of funds in the best way forward. We also have an evaluation partner at BYU that's been conducting evaluations, it would allow us the time to really make sure that all of that work is done as well and can make legitimate recommendations to us about what worked and what didn't, which is
Yeah.
the whole purpose of a pilot.
So it was like in the 3 years, well, in the 2 years, technically, since it's still 2024, it's been like, find LEAs to do this. Then, and give them funding, so go through that whole process. They have to create a plan, like that's what they've been doing, and they haven't been able to fully implement it to even know if it's been effective or something that's been useful.
It varies, obviously. from
Okay.
LEA to LEA, and some LEAs that thought they would need quite a bit of money, are able to enact some things with far fewer funds.
Which then opens up for other LEAs with the opportunity to do it, so
Yes,
then you have to find that, okay, I understand, yeah.
So we're trying to do that.
And 2 years, you think more is
2 years more would
2027?
be great.
Okay, I don't know. I don't have any information. I mean, I hate to say that, but there's not any information here. I don't know if I don't know what the programs are. I don't know what they're doing. To me, it could go away, right? I can see the goals of this, but I don't know we've probably been doing great things. I guess what I'm saying is I need more information before I can make a decision on this. Does that make sense? And we just approved a pilot program earlier and we had 5 criteria in it, right? And I'm looking at what the criteria is. Is there a way to know like I said, before I could make a recommendation, I actually want to see, is it Jordan School District and what are they doing and how are we measuring this? Right, because you had to get approvals, right? We got approvals because we dispersed money.
Right.
So is there any way to get a report from them?
Yeah, actually, BYU is working on a report.
Well, I did know that, but when is that gonna be done?
I talked with Randy, he said that by the end of the month.
Okay.
So we could get more information for you, for sure.
Well, if we ended up having an additional meeting for another item, then we could include that on, but right now I don't feel like it could go away or it could stay. I just don't know, right? Because I don't have any information to make that decision on.
Sure.
If it's not fulfilling these items, then to me, I'm like, maybe not.
So that was our reason for like not killing it, because we're like, we don't know, maybe it's great, maybe it's amazing. But the thing maybe for Greg is if we were to bring that to the August full board, let's say we put it forth and say, sure, like maybe. And then we have the data to go with backup for August. And then when the full board votes on it.
Yeah, but I have that. I couldn't move it forward with that information. But my question is when do we have to report to interim? Do we have to report in September or October?
Is necessary or?
I'm gonna have to check on when they're gonna call us to report. I can talk with Micah and get back to you on that. I know it is coming up. We did a similar thing last year. I just can't remember which month it was that they called us in, but it was before we started session. And I wanna say it was somewhere in the October, November time.
Yeah, because they're gonna want a recommendation for us, right?
So we will need to give them, well, I mean, we don't have to give them a recommendation. They would like one from us. If we don't give a recommendation, then the legislature is just gonna do whatever they feel they wanna do without any input from us as well. So.
Yeah, because I'd like this to move forward based on the components, right? Promoting responsibility, preserving, defending the blessings of liberty secured by the Constitution of the United States, building confidence in the foundations of American democracy, American civic and political institutions, and foundational constitutional concepts. I love that. Right?
I feel like the fact that we've not been able to complete the cycle because there just hasn't been enough time to get the information back. I would say if in 3 years we don't have the information back, then if we want to continue for 2 more years, if we suggest that, then we will be able to complete the cycle that will give us we'll be then at that moment in a position to make a decision, is this an ongoing thing that we're gonna do statewide? Because all of these parameters that we've listed are so strong, but at this point, we just we've not been able to progress in 3 years.
You're saying that basically the information that you want, we don't have yet because it's still.
We do have some information though. But we know what they're doing. We just don't know the full outcomes. We know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing though. Right? That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense? I don't know what they're doing.
Is there examples? I don't know if that would exhaust what you need.
Yeah, I mean,
Since you got the cost any more money. The money is already obligated. There's no additional funding that needs to come. It really is just giving LEAs more time to complete their projects. Do you want to give a few examples, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge is just, and I'm sure some folks working in districts can understand that getting districts to actually expend the funds, say, okay, let's get, for example, in Jordan School District, they want to provide a range of professional learning opportunities specific to historical case studies that show civic components that teachers can then use to blend civics concepts and history education in their classrooms. And they estimated they would have 50 teachers sign up for that professional learning, and they didn't. And they're having to rethink, how can we provide that opportunity in other ways or at other times, because teachers are just, their bandwidth is not there. San Juan District is doing amazing work around student leadership and growing academic service learning projects with student leaders. They are not spending as much money as they thought they would. So, but they do have some great work that they're providing. In Canyon School District, the biggest work there has been around helping teachers understand media literacy and misinformation and disinformation and sourcing of information as a critical civic skill that students need to be able to understand and navigate as a part of being a responsible citizen. And so they're tying those concepts into constitutional concepts. So they are actually doing a great job at expending all of their funds and providing some really powerful professional learning for teachers. The questions there will be how much facility those teachers have in then implementing that in their classroom. Other programs have been mock trial programs. We the People, which is it's not necessarily an innovation, except it's an innovation because not very many teachers do it across the state. And so they've been trying to enact a program called We the People that is specific to kind of a simulation of an authentic congressional hearing where students defend constitutional principles and have judges kind of judge those outcomes. And it's an incredible program. It's just really small because it's one more thing. So this grant actually provides support for teachers to be able to implement it. So those are some of the projects that have been funded that we just would like to see them grow more of them and just have more time for districts to actually implement.
Okay. Can we get a list of who and what they're doing? Because I need more evidence, and I'm not suggesting anybody's doing any fair, so I'm not saying anything like that. I'm asking for additional funding for additional years. I want to know that what I'm asking for is.
It's not additional funding, but just
It's not additional funding. We're just asking for more time to expend the funding that's already been.
They're appealing the.
Already been set aside.
Okay, but I have to still argue. I have to argue then that this was worth not cutting the funding off, right? So I've got to be able to argue these 12, how many?
12 LEAs.
12 LEAs are doing these things. They're well worth the time because they're meeting these, you know what I mean? And we don't have all the research yet, right?
Right.
But we have some.
We do have some.
Right? So that,
right.
Yeah, is there, anyway, can you get that? So I just ought to be able to say, when I go talk to legislators, say, yeah, this is well worth our time, or yeah, maybe it's not.
It
Maybe
sounds
it's
like
not.
we have time to do that too. It doesn't need to be rushed and.
But if we do end up having to do a special meeting for the previous rule, then we could do two things. We may not need to, we could do it in August. That's why I was asking.
Sounds like it could be in August to give them more time if you want to get that report.
August, September would go before the board if we did in August.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. I mean, we'll have that data from Randy Davies is the person at NYU who's pulling that evaluation.
Will he be done by then? Okay. Okay, so that would be information we could use. I just, like I said, I have to.
You want to be informed?
Yeah, defend it, and chances are I'm gonna get asked, right? By more than one legislator, and they're gonna be, is this just another whatever, or does this actually doing what it says? Is it actually building strong civic duties within,
Right.
our students? I can't answer that right now. I have some examples of things that people are doing, but I can't, I don't know. I don't know.
And
So,
for me, the idea of the 3-year pilot seemed like it would have been ample time. And it's not, it's just not. We need more time. We have that $1.5 million allocation.
Yeah.
And that's the money that we're working with. And honestly, a lot of LEAs have just never had money for civics. So it's kind of a new challenge for them to figure out how to expend it well.
And consistently, we see that 3 years is not long enough. 5 years has been the time needed for lots of grants.
Because you have to develop it out, right? It takes a year,
then
then you have to do.
planning, the second year's implementation, third year, kids actually get impacted. And so it's difficult to say the impact this is having on outcomes because of the time.
but we may not know the impact, but we know the program.
Know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what I want.
We'll have teacher impact data, but not necessarily student outcomes.
Good. All right, so then,
I would ask we won't have that until they turn 18 and know if they voted or not.
I'll tell you from interviewing kids, they're all about voting.
Okay, are you more likely to?
all right, so our plan then is to perhaps
We just
get
move
more
to the next.
information before this special meeting, which I think will probably happen.
Yeah.
And then we will take action at that point.
If that's okay.
So we'll.
Like I said, I have to defend something and I want to
We have a motion to put it on hold.
Like throwing you in front of
Yeah.
legislators.
Do we have to do anything?
Yeah.
If we don't move it forward,
anything. Well,
it'll just be put on the agenda.
no, it doesn't
No
automatically.
action.
Yeah, no
It
action.
shows no action came
Yeah.
out of committee.
So if you.
So we would recommend that it come back to committee. That would be the recommended action, right?
But point of clarification, would the August meeting or a special meeting? That's the question.
Yeah, I think
We know-
August is fine.
We'll
Rather give more time.
I'll just say the next meeting. Can I just say that? Because if we have a special meeting, then
Say future agenda, and then we can, then leadership.
that work?
I just want to make sure they have time to get all the things so that it's not like, well, we're still waiting.
You mean Wednesday won't be good enough?
Tomorrow.
So, okay.
I can see if Micah's giving me a date when they want that.
Do we need to do that as a motion then to put it on the future?
No, they can just direct staff to put it on the, we just need to know if you want it back on, because without it, then we have to come back and say.
Oh, what is that where you want to?
Yeah, we just direct staff. Yeah, we're good, and that's not a motion.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Are you still here for the other
School
two?
security task force.
You took those off. Now I have. Yeah.
I think they're still on our civic learning.
1.9, education goal.
Yeah, they should, we need to have,
Sunset items, section.
That's 9 and 10 not on there.
Mine is USBE strategic planning.
That's good. That must have happened the
Expiration.
last day. Two were taken off.
That one was off.
so the
That's off.
strategic plan and goal, strategic plan is next.
Okay,
I only have
okay.
50 minutes, so.
All right, so we have, as we have discussed in our last study session, the opportunity to identify a goal that could be one of the primary focuses for the agency action over the next 5 years. And these goals will be brought back to the full board for discussion in August. I think of all of the goals, the things that we have been doing, when you look at the 4 goals that have been the focus of the agency for the last number of years, there's certainly always one that has something to do with academic achievement and growth on the part of our students. And I would like to propose that we carefully consider some goals centered around academic excellence, since that seems to be one of the major points of interest from parents, from our critics across the state. I'm hopeful that we can tell the story more accurately regarding the good things that are happening and set some high goals that will stretch us, maybe even some goals that are challenging and rigorous enough that we have to strengthen our muscles and get stronger through having to go after these high and rigorous academic excellence goals. What ideas do you have? What ideas have you had as you've been considering a goal that you might be able to recommend as standards and assessments contribution to our board goals for this year? Yes, Sarah, that's.
This is just so broad to me. And that's why we're creating goals that are more
So what is the goal?
specific. That's why it's like, because, if some priorities I have are actually focused on multilingual learners and support there, because we're seeing that increase in our student population. And that is one piece, of if we want academic excellence for all of our students in the state of Utah, we have to recognize at a starting point that not all students are created equal. Not all students have the same opportunities. Not all students have the same abilities and support systems, right? And so for me, if we want to have it overall academic excellence, we have to find ways to provide support to those that may be falling behind. And one area that I've found that I think is from P through 20 that we're seeing is one, developmental math and English, and getting students to a better place when it comes to math and English. But then the second part is all of the students who are starting at a different place, which is English is not their first language. So that's something that I feel is very specific, maybe too specific, but that's a place where, and maybe it's more, if we were to make it more broad, it's like supporting students who are finding support systems for students who are developmentally behind or leading to developmental math or English or something like that.
So is there a way that we can do a goal that has to do with academic excellence, but it's an umbrella goal that breaks down to 5 goals, one of them being with our English language learners or
multilingual
English is a second. So that's one. One is with developmental math. One of them is with reading.
Yeah, sorry, that was a higher ed thing that I called it developmental English. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we identify then something that would cover the gamut of students, maybe there's even academic excellence for gifted and talented, because I've been just amazed at how many parents have talked to me over this election cycle about, well, where my child is so smart and so gifted and so under challenged and under.
And maybe part of that could be expanding opportunities for concurrent enrollment, AP and IB programs or something like that,
So I think if we were to just come up with a goal that could then be divided out to in some way include whatever we identify as the main groups of students, so that every child fits in there somewhere, whether it's with the math and the numeracy literacy component, whether it's with the gifted and those that
advanced,
whether it's the English language learners, there are probably other groups that we ought to identify. And 5 is not a magic number either, but whatever areas of focus, however we divide out that academic excellence, as we come up with our priorities of what we're going to focus on in academic excellence, we do endeavor to be inclusive, even though that word, we probably shouldn't use it.
It's more like,
for every child.
Yeah.
I just want every child to.
So and I don't know that I'm wording this right, but I think when a parent, no matter where their child is, background, whatever, or language, right, barriers, that they would expect when a child enters, that by the end of that school year, it's 1 year of growth or 1 year of teaching, right, from wherever they're at. I think that's
Like a personalized learning type.
yeah, not necessarily
No.
personalized learning, but I mean, it could be, but what we're saying is that when, and this goes back to my narrative yesterday, it didn't get passed, by the way. Just throwing that out there so everybody can be. Anyways, it's just this idea of that responsibility. We're providing the resources in such a way that an educator can be, and I'm using fully, because I think when they're in their classroom, they really can be fully responsible for the things that they do and the education of their children, despite the fact they come from low income, despite the fact
They might have not paired.
yeah, despite all these things, that when they come into that classroom, that the educator is prepared in such a way that that child is going to get at least a year's worth of growth for the year's worth of teaching. And if it's, multilingual, there's a good chance that they may even get a little bit more than that if they're, depending on how they're, what kind of resources they're helping with that. But, okay, just throwing that out there.
So like to put that. Well, okay, I actually like that. I like a year's worth of growth for.
Yeah, because it's everyone.
Yeah,
It's
I get that.
encompassing,
It does.
right? And I don't know if that's the right wording. Maybe there's a better way to say that, but I catchy. I just think if they're gonna, when a student comes through the door, that they can expect, and the teacher can expect, I'm gonna provide a year's worth of, education for the child. But I think when it comes to standards and assessments, I think there needs to be, rigorous is a often used word, but that the learning experiences and the teaching of certain disciplines, whether that's science or math or reading, should reflect the best practices for the largest amount of gains, right? The most effective strategies, the most effective learning. I'm going to go back to that when we align the assessments with the standards, with the curriculum, when that whole thing flows as the right cycle, you have a great deal of progress.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to getting that coherent is pretty tricky, but any of that makes sense. Patty, or did you write it down in better language for me?
So I'm doing learning experiences and teaching of a course that should be fully aligned and coherent to, and then I don't know what you're gonna end up with.
Well, it's just sort of like, I don't know, do you think that like, maybe this is a very random example, but reevaluating assessments to determine those that show the greatest growth in.
Or no growth at all?
Right,
Like,
this, it's probably no surprise, that's fine. I have, when it comes to assessment, I often am like, are these assessments truly helping students advance, right? Or are they just an assessment to be an assessment? So assessing our assessments is basically a way to say that, because and there are some that are great and useful tools, right? But if we don't have the results from the lead up to the assessment and the assessment, then is that assessment worthwhile in advancing or giving that academic rigor that we're looking for, right?
Yes. No, this is not for me. I will only speak once, but I love the idea of the growth. The issue that we've seen with Acadians and teachers get satisfied with typical progress for kids who need above or well above typical progress to close the gap. And so as you think about that, this does not accelerate students who need to be accelerated in terms of they're behind and they need to grow more than a year's worth. And so just thinking about how you might integrate that to say, and I liked your even just your at least language, a year's worth of growth for kids who are behind is not enough. And we have teachers who get comfortable with thinking I made that year's worth of growth and that kid is still 2 or 3 years behind, if that makes sense. They came in like a second grader, they're leaving me like a third grader, but they're now going to be a sixth grader. And that is not sufficient. I really want to kind of push on the teachers' thinking on that because our data suggests to them, well, they made typical progress like other kids like them. Awesome. We can't have typical progress for kids who are behind. So if you would do me a favor and think through what that might look like to gentle pressure relentlessly applied on our educators, that a year's worth is not sufficient for kids who are behind needing to grow more.
That's a good point.
You know, and I love just as we're kind of in the brainstorming mood, I love literacy and numeracy. But I was listening to a science teacher from a middle school over in Payson last Monday, and he was just talking about how his entire career he's fought against the feeling that he's the other, one of the other subjects that's not literacy and numeracy. That you just knock yourself out and do wonderful things with your student because you're a committed, vibrant teacher, but it's looked upon as not that important. Oh, you're doing nice things, great. Okay, now what's happening with reading and math? You know, it's just kind of dismissed as one of the other. And I watched that for a long time. My wife and I were really into keyboarding, and we wrote 3 books and came up with all kinds of activities and wrote songs that the kids would sing to learn all of their keyboarding things. And we had kids, you know, that were keyboarding at amazing speed and accuracy. And we started them at 3rd grade, and in certain districts across the state, we made it available to the state at no cost. And it was just a matter of seeing incredible growth. And then as a result, other subject areas, other content areas benefited from the fact that these kids had developed the capacity to recognize words that are used, you know, over and over and over again, most used words and developing skills in keyboarding. It was just so fun to see how one subject area, even though keyboarding was definitely one of the other subjects way down on the list and halfway buried in some school districts' minds in terms of its value, but it had such a cooperative impact when combined with the efforts of all of the other subject areas with numeracy and literacy. And so we started to feel the power of synergy between all of these critical areas of knowledge and academic achievement. And it was just starting to just soar in terms of the capacity of an individual student. So I would love to see if there was a way to give a little shot in the arm or a little, I don't know what we do with every content area, you know, we thinking of all of those other content areas as something that's rich and vibrant and critical to the overall academic health and excitement of learning, the journey of learning, so that some of those faculty members who now for 30 years have been trying to teach science at the middle school, or they've been trying to teach social studies or whatever, and they're considered like 2nd class or 4th class citizens, suddenly feel somebody's recognizing that this is important, and look how well my kids are doing, and look how well it's contributing to the academic mastery and academic excellence of the whole citizenry of our children.
Yeah, my example would be, I think kids need more PE, because if they get their workouts out and they get their exercise, they're better at learning later, you know, same kind of example. Is there something to be said about, like, maybe this is to Jennifer's points, like wrap around, maybe not wrap around, but like academic support services, opportunities for academic support services to then get them to the level they need to be, like some sort of, I don't know if that looks like or how to say it, but
It sounds like you're talking like well-rounded education, right? Like we don't, like reading and math, you put it up there. We don't want that to be the only thing. And knowledge matters. The research literature around, if you want to improve literacy scores, kids need knowledge in science, in social studies, in arts. They can't just be, you can't get a better comprehender by just keep reading things that they already know. You have to start building their knowledge. And so maybe it's you thinking about how do you promote a well-rounded education that includes science, social studies, PE as part of that experience to bring academic excellence. Because if you want to improve reading and math, you need the content knowledge to do so.
That is what I was talking about yesterday. So you have to have, you take the greater knowledge, you build upon it, right? And that's where and you have to build out the knowledge, not just, it is background, but it's not just background, right? Then you expand
Prior experience, like all of that comes.
How do I put that in a?
When you don't know.
Yeah, when you don't know, it's really hard to comprehend.
Right. That's cool. I have something, and this is kind of like a foundational way of learning. It's called the trivium. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. The heart of education. It's that they're the three basic tools of learning: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So anyway, I put like multiple things together. Cultivate wisdom through the trivium of learning and the application of quality standards. Google in one word. But what that would do is it touches on what you were just saying, Chair Booth, about taking flight, things gaining momentum. It's adding in all the different working parts, the PE, the music, the things that fortify. Yeah. That gives you personality, provides the experiences.
Right? Like some kids don't want to come to school just for reading and math.
Yeah.
That's true. Can you just repeat that?
I'll just throw it out there. Cultivate wisdom through the trivium of learning and the application of quality standards. And again, trivium is specific to grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So when people say we want kids to think for themselves, there's just that nod on how we provide the scaffolding with the wisdom, like the information, the science, the articles, whatever, that gives them a library of information to pull from. That develops that wisdom, but that comes through grammar and all of the parts that brings into a child being able to learn. Anyway, so cultivate wisdom through the trivium of learning and the application of quality standards. And then the quality standards gives a nod to, are we developing quality standards in this workspace and everybody involved that triggers that trivium learning, which then cultivates, the wisdom and fortification in our students. So
Okay,
that's the
and the
best I
three
got.
things were grammar, rhetoric, and
Grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
So is there like critical thinking in there? Yeah, that's like, it's like, if you can communicate, if you can think critically, and if you can write well, you know what I mean? Like write well / communicate, think critically, and understand how to work well with others. It's like the three best things you can learn.
I think that's where the rhetoric comes in. It's like that nod to being able to pull from your library of all the information that you've studied and all the different opinions and all kind of the workings of the world and be able to engage in that dialogue.
Well, what the three word means or three roads means, so you guys could define what trivium is in maybe more layman's terms. I don't know who your audience is for some of this. So rhetoric starts to get at that above the 8th grade or 4th grade. Like, do you want to say communicate or think logically or things like that as you think about what's your three roads that you want to converge using that trivium?
Trivium, I know.
We use triumvirate in my school district maybe, so like that term is familiar, so it's like, okay.
The grammar focuses on K through 6, which is where that building is, right? Like K through 4, you learn to read. 4, you're reading.
Yeah, so thinking like grammar, I think a lot of people just think like sentence diagramming, but there's a lot more.
So all of that, and then you go into logic.
Terms with logic is great. I think that one most people can get, but rhetoric, I think it gets above that.
Well, that's the deep thinking,
Mhm.
right? The
That's
rhetoric is when you now take
What you know.
the structures, right? That's just like in math, you learn structures. Then you begin to apply them and then you can expand them out,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's more or less what that is. It's the transferring in a deeper sense, right? In the application.
Well, that might be instead of rhetoric, you say transfer of learning, like to unique situations or something like that. Just stuff that as an educator, they're gonna be like, yeah, I can do that. Rhetoric leaves a lot of open opportunity.
Rhetoric also can be used as all the rhetoric.
Yes, totally.
Rhetoric in an academic setting is actually applied knowledge and
Applied knowledge sounds great. Like that's what we want teachers to do, right? Not just feed the knowledge, but have kids use the knowledge for purposeful.
they have logic. The grammar builds what they pull from. The logic gives them the ability to critically think, and the rhetoric allows them to communicate that in the world around them.
Oh, I like that. That was very smart.
Layman's terms.
I got that. That's
Okay, good.
And boy, you know, you need that because I'm searching I'm searching to figure, okay, so what do those three things mean? But when you just said that, I went, okay, I got that.
Yeah, you need an easier entry point.
Isn't that so interesting how words matter? I mean, those three words matter, but the words that you just chose to help me get the meaning of those three words just absolutely went, yeah, all right, let's do it.
You have to listen to the video because I won't be able to repeat that.
That was really good.
We can go back to the recording because the simplification of the language is way more powerful. People get lost in it. I love it.
It's kind of cool though to have the big words because people kind of like align with them and go, this is something academically, this has got meat on them bones, you know?
Yep.
This is something rigorous, something that you gotta work for, something that I can do hard things. And when you accomplish that, then the accomplishment is so much sweeter because of how dang hard you had to work to get there.
Yes, I agree with that. Absolutely. Well, and it's inspirational, aspirational, you know.
Absolutely.
We want to inspire. And I think that's something that teachers want too, you know, that passion.
Like, they're not gonna, like what's gonna excite me as a teacher and get me re-engaged, those words may not be, but the words you gave after were. Like just as a passion for it, like, yeah, I want to get.
That was really.
And
that feels like something you would want to commit your life and your energy. And I mean, the hard work that they've been putting in for years feels justified in what you expressed.
Yes.
You know, it feels like I have a life of meaning. I'm not just going to the rock pile and putting in my, punching the clock every day. This is a work that I can invest.
I guess it does speak to the attendance thing back. We're asking about the attendance. Kids want to be there. We want kids to want to be there, right?
Like,
and not
they
just
have that. They want to be there because it's not about the content. It's about the application and use and this deeper understanding. Yeah, they can see it. Or we read this Shakespeare, but for what reason? Now it's to help us.
How do we help achieve that so that, I mean, one of the sub parts of these goals is how to help every child feel like they want to be there. You know, I look at my three little granddaughters down in California that we just went down to see their last week of school, and they are all three really fun, precocious little personalities, really talented as only a grandpa can, judge. But they love school, everything about it. Every single day, they are racing out the door. They would not even dream of missing school. I mean, it's just, that is their lifeblood. And they, of course, do well. I mean, they're at the top of the class. They get it. And they love it. How exciting would it be if we could figure out what is that magic potion that will allow every child to love school and love learning and love that experience.
So what do we have to do? Are we just brainstorming still? Do we have to come up with okay.
It's, if you look at the agenda, we have, this piece on here. That
I just wonder if we need to make a motion or if we're
Yeah.
we're just
And
brainstorming.
I don't know that it's a
and
motion,
resolve
it's
this.
just,
Kind of starting to head somewhere. Is that the
Yeah.
idea?
Because let me find which slide it is.
Because I guess to me, and I am looking at time because I'm going 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, we just have,
But we're looking at, I mean, if we were to take academic excellence, build something around this, and then we have to start asking ourselves, what are the structures that lead to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
And then that would be, what are those different pieces? Well, there would be an assessment piece, right? Assessing the assessments or that kind of thing. There would be a standards piece and maybe, I don't know what else.
So the role that we were asked was, could each committee develop a key goal or priority in alignment with the board's mission vision, and then other feedback on current reporting mechanism and which performance measures align with this prioritized area of focus. And so I think right now we're to the identifying a key goal or priority, and we haven't yet gotten to the current reporting mechanisms towards this goal or to the measures that would align with the areas of focus. So this is an initial piece.
Okay.
Think about. And let's simmer. Yeah, I guess. Would they need a motion on it? Brainstorming? I don't hear that in the
assignment was to have a motion on it, just to have it prepared for when you do your planning as a.
And there's a good
study
chance we
session.
won't get to it today. I can just tell you right now, unless you guys want to be here till 7 or 8
No.
tonight. So just because of all the other, I just leftovers from yesterday.
So fine.
There's some big lifts.
so is this a good start? And then we can jump to these other ones really quick? Or what's your
So
priority?
what else we have on our agenda for today?
Chair Wu, if I may, we have 4 that are information items, and if we did 5 minutes each, we would go right to 12:30.
I did touch base with Joanna, who said that she just said that she's happy to send the information on. If we wanted to do it in August, but that's up to your guys' discretion. I just ran into her, we were coming in. She goes, if you guys get pressed for time.
Things, and she sent me some stuff to put in backup.
Okay.
And so you guys can look at that, and then if you have any questions, maybe
And August would be better.
forward those.
Kind of at a point where Jordan's at, we'll actually have more content. for you
Okay.
in August, so.
I just wanted to.
So we can move that one to August.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess, yeah.
And the AI update is quick as well, so.
Well, should we go with some of those?
Quick ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, is math, is that a quick one or is that a longer one? Be quick. Yeah, let's start with math.
All right. Great.
To the table.
What time is yours?
Thank you for having me. I am Molly Basham. I am the Early Learning Mathematics Specialist on the Teaching and Learning team, and I have 2 handouts for you guys that I'm just gonna pass teacher style and let you pass it around to yourselves. One of those is our bi-monthly update document on the standards revision work. The other one is a celebration that we wanted to take this opportunity to slide in and share with you because we love opportunities to celebrate. We're talking a little bit about assessing our assessments and about how math and literacy sometimes come out on top. But this is just a really awesome opportunity to share some wins for our early elementary students and our early elementary teachers and leaders. Over the past 3 years across the state, we have been implementing Acadian's math. And this is based on middle of the year data, not end of the year data, because LEAs still have till the end of this month to finish reporting that. But what you can see on this graphic, and it is 2-sided, over the past 3 years, we have consistently seen the percentage of students in K through 3 scoring at or above benchmark on Acadian's math and showing typical or better progress. So showing that growth, like Jennifer talked about, increasing across all 3 grade levels across all 3 years, which is just such an amazing thing. And we wanted to take that opportunity to share that with you, to celebrate our students and our educators who have worked so hard to make those improvements, especially at a time when early literacy has been a huge lift for those teachers, they're still managing to show growth on the assessment with their students in math. So just a huge celebration. We wanted to.
Second graders, 13%
Huge.
increase.
Yeah, huge. And that's on, that side is showing the students showing typical or better progress, which to me, like that's the mark that means the most to me, is like that's their growth. We want students meeting benchmark, but we really want more than anything to see all students showing that growth, whether they're starting below, starting at benchmark, or starting at above. The fact that second grade did have, I think it was 13%, is just amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me just make sure I understand. This is beginning of year, middle of year, end of year.
It does not have end of year on there because we don't have this year's end of year data yet. What's that showing? Yeah, it's showing the 21-22 school year, the 22-23. Yes.
Middle of the year.
Middle, yeah, the middle of the year
They
data.
should be 22, 23, 23, 24.
They should.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I think you're. Well, that's why I was confused. I'm like, I see three.
We looked at that many times.
Yeah, 1,000 times.
You're okay, I was just trying to understand.
I would understand where the confusion came in. Yeah, we had a lot of eyes on that and all missed it, so.
No, you're good.
The past 3 years, middle of the year data, and we're hopeful that the end of the year data.
So
will
we're comparing the same time frame is what I was
Same,
wondering.
same timeframe over 3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
We're seeing progress, which is cool.
And just making typos on our pretty graphic, but that's okay. But the reason you have us here today is for the update on the Standards and Assessment Committee. So the other document that I shared with you was just that update document. We have the work underway with our absolutely amazing writing committee. I cannot brag on them enough. We have been meeting through April and May with our lead writers who are going to be in charge of each strand-based writing team. To really take a deep dive based on the recommendations provided by the board and the writing committee that were approved back in March, I believe, to look through those recommendations and get started on the work to lay the foundations for the work that they will be doing this summer and in the coming months with their writing teams. We have spent a lot of time with the leads looking at the existing standards for mathematical practice and generating a list of mathematical skills that can be a target for all students by the time they graduate in the P-12 system to be able to engage in those mathematical skills. They've put some work in to align those to make sure that they're coherent across the system from P-12 and have language that's appropriate at each of those grade levels. Our elementary leads have taken some time to really look at our elementary standards for that coherence vertically and across strands to make sure that the language is consistent, to look for areas where there's gaps, opportunities for improvements, opportunities to make the language more concise and understandable. And our secondary writers have worked a lot on the course taking sequence in secondary, and both elementary and secondary leads are in the process right now of getting meetings on the calendar with their strand-based writing teams to start diving into that work. So got lots of fun meeting notices popping up on my calendar as they're getting that in place. And we will be checking back in formally with the lead writers at the end of June to touch base on the work that they're doing with their writing teams this month.
Okay, and are they going to be giving us clear mastery, meaning that at this grade, you should have this done. At this grade, this should be, or it's we understand by third grade, you're going to have your addition and subtraction. We're not, right? It's master. Is there something along that lines? I just don't want the standards to be broad and nice and that the language aligns vertically and horizontally, but then we still don't have clear expectations, right? By the end of third grade, by the end of fifth grade, these things should be mastered.
So we're being really careful. Yeah, and if I'm not answering your question, please let me know. We're being really careful to attend to the definition of standards that's in statute of it being a skill plus a competency, making sure that that mastery piece, that we're not crossing the realm of what belongs in the assessment side of things. So I want to say yes, and making sure that we write standards that are accessible while still leaving what goes into an assessment up to our folks upstairs who will write the assessments once the standards are finalized.
We've talked about this just to redirect with Merle's question, like the need for procedural fluency. There have been initial discussions with the leads around by second grade, they should do this, like some kind of skill expectation. Yeah, it's the standard of the standards, but what's the skill expectation? So like in literacy in preschool, we wanted kids to know 20 of the 26 letters by the end. That's more what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yes.
And
It's very different than a standard, like you're gonna.
And it's not an assessment, but it is where you might measure it.
The CTE stuff, right, where you
Yeah.
have the standards and then they have the performance test.
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah.
That's what I'm kind of seeing for math from what the recommendations have come. And they're discussing what that could look like. I think that's the challenge of like, do you want to set it to be 50 in a minute of this addition? What does addition subtraction look like? To say you've mastered it. That's the trickier line at this.
It's just the automaticity end of it when you get to a certain grade that we're not still using mechanisms unless students need it. Sometimes I've got students that still do this, right?
They're efficient.
It's a skill, right, that they can quickly do.
I'm trying to figure out how to weave the skills in because all our other standards in TNL don't have skills. CTE do have skills. So we're trying to think about what does that look like in core standards.
We're to the the rhetoric part?
Yes. The standard.
Yeah.
So I think that's been our challenge is like we don't have great examples across the country of what that looks like.
Well, yes, we do not, and that's the point.
So we're
we
trying
need
to, that's been a big, hard thing.
Just so it's clear, but and this goes to
that look like.
Yeah, this goes to that concise. I don't want fewer standards necessarily. Maybe we do, but I want concise standards so that students and educators know exactly what in second grade, when I leave second grade, X, Y, and Z, right? When I leave third grade, X, Y, and Z, so that it's not ambiguous about where we expect kids to be.
I think, Nathan, former high school math specialist, current STEM coordinator, and filling in for Lindsay Henderson for the next few months until we hire a new Lindsay Henderson. I think there's actually a great resource that I think we spoke about at one point, board member Earl, in statute with regards to the definition of standards. Molly was getting at it, where it talks about a standard as a competency that combines knowledge and skills. So competencies are kind of a description of what students should know, and the precision of what that looks like, being knowledge plus skill, is what we've given the writing committee. And so we're hopeful that there will be more clarity that comes out of those two things being a part of every standard. Because currently there's some standards that are like more focused on skills, but they don't mention knowledge as much. Most standards are focused more on knowledge, but there's not like discussion of skills. And so the hope is that by combining each of those two things will bring more precision and clarity to the field.
So I like how you just described that, and I'm wondering if there's the separation between the structure of knowledge and skill. So if I were to say what just came in my head, okay, let's just say K through 6, the knowledge would be that, 7 times 7 is 49. And then you can take that knowledge now and apply it to a skill, which is higher level thinking, maybe in the math realm. So there's that just came to my mind. I don't know what it has to do with anything. I don't know if that's how you're trying to figure this out though. Because then when we hear this conversation that, this certain amount of this percentage of, 11th graders or whatever are pass the test. And I had posed this to a meeting that I just had with Lindsay and Superintendent Norman. Let's say 100% of our 11th graders pass the test. What is it that 100% of our students know? Is it 7 times 7 is 49? Do 100% of our students know that? Because I think a lot of these arguments leave out the realities of what it is that percentage represents in the assessments. And so if we could start having those conversations and structuring our standards or the way we're going to teach math, that it is traceable, that at the end of 6th grade, or let's say even 8th grade, every single 8th grader knows their multiplication facts 0 through 12. Is it set up that way right now?
So right now, most grading systems are associated in a fashion that we can't answer the question that you just posed. Like, what percentage of students know like this standard, this idea? And so if all the students pass the test with, say, a 60%, like each of those students got a different 60% of the answers right. And so we don't know who knows what in most systems. But there's a lot of communities across the state that are starting to pilot and we have a few that are more advanced in competency-based education, which is kind of rigorously tracking what students know from standard to standard throughout a school year, and then even from school year to school year. And there is not expectations that those types of systems are in play. At the moment, it's just kind of an innovative space that a number of communities are pursuing.
So I wonder then, because the dialogue can also be foundational knowledge. So then you have to define, well, what's foundational knowledge, what's rigorous academics? Is it the fact that, you know, our students are being given a foundation of their knowledge of multiplication? All of them know that, like that is the academic foundations. That is tested because we recognize it catapults them and frees them to engage in math uninhibited because they have the foundation to do so. So, but if we avoid that in our standards, then I beg the argument that they'll never launch and we won't see our scores launch into these higher percentage rates. And so I'm like, can we put our thumb on maybe the disconnect there and think outside the box and see if can we do that?
Yeah, well, if you go back to your trivia, the grammar in math would be operations, right?
Yeah.
Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, like basic understanding of that. Then you'd go to like that skill level of, okay, well, I need to know how to do that and when I would use which operation.
Yep.
And now it's like, I need to transfer my knowledge and I need to use all of those interchangeably, but you're not telling me which one I need right now, which is that final, like, of those three pillars that you identified with the trivium. I think that's where you guys are headed, like from the initial discussions. Obviously, it's really early, but the recommendations really do get at this. Like, it's clear from the board and the parent committee that there's this need to further articulate what does it mean to be successful in mathematics beyond, you know how to do addition in multiple ways. Awesome. Can you also do it with automaticity and accuracy?
Yes.
Those are for me, and I'm sure for you, have come across really clearly. It's just figuring out what that looks like in a standard. I think it's the leads, like they get it, they want that too. It's figuring out how you write that into standards is where we're kind of lots of brainstorming.
Maybe a non-traditional, and I say traditional in that it's not the current trend of writing standards.
We are open. And this will be the cutting edge. Is what I'm saying. It's good. I like that. Much boundary. We like the cutting edge for the next set of standards.
We're writing a model for the rest of the nation.
There you go. And I mean, that's been like they've been looking for a year. Like that's a good goal. No one has. So.
And in the past, it's really been defined by the verb that was used in the standard itself. So the rigor that you're talking about was where, you know, Bloom's taxonomy, what rigor did we want? And that was the verb that would start the standard with, you know, create, engage, analyze, whatever that is, or just know or whatever. And so in the past, it's always been, well, what rigor level? Well, that's the verb, but it doesn't get to what used to be called, and this is really going to date me, KSA, knowledge, skills, and then applications. So you have the knowledge, then you do the skills part, and then you're applying it to new and unique situations or the real world or whatever that looked like. So it used to be called KSA, and it used to be able to say, then we're going to decide where it fits in that continuum according to the verb we use. They're going past the verb, and that's what we're asking of them at this point in time. So it's not just like engage. It's like, well, what does that look like? I want to know what that looks like according to the old KSA. You know, is it a knowledge? Is it skills? Is it application? And to what level or depth is that? So it's really asking them to kind of triangulate in a way those three things together to show that piece.
Yeah, that is the work that this committee has ahead of them.
We're so excited. And I guess like I think you're saying what we're trying to say as well, that I don't want, I guess my worst fear is that we'll create standards that are very abstract. And I guess like in some realms, and I'm going to isolate it to K through 6 or K through 5, because those are the foundational years as far as, you know, being able to launch next level. Can we decide, and I'm going to keep it to multiplication, that by grade 5 or grade 6 or whatever, that 100% of our students know there's 0 to 12 times tables. And I'm just doing that, I'm isolating that as just an example. Is that possible?
I think there are opportunities and even in our existing standards, we have standards that say students will know from memory addition facts within 20, or students will know from memory like addition facts within 10. I spent a lot of time in the very early days, so those are the standards I know the best. We have those standards, and that is something that our leads, they're having that exact conversation. Like, what are the critical foundations? How do we capture those in these new standards in ways that are really easy to understand and that make it really clear that we do want all students at this grade level to know how to do these problems. We want students at this grade level to be able to pull them quickly from memory. You know, like a kindergartner may be able to solve addition problems within 10, but we wouldn't necessarily expect them to memorize it. But a first grader, we would expect them to be able to pull those facts out much more quickly because they've had that time to practice and develop additional number sense.
And do these tests represent those studies? Like, or those standards? Yes, our assessments will line up with the standards, right?
A lot of, I mean, one of the tests is computation. It is truly, in fact,
right, it is truly a time.
And so like one addition, I think, is the board rule that kind of directs our work in standards is 277-700. And it asks us to lay out all of us being USBE broadly. To identify the standards that all students need at each grade level. And then that board rule expects that every student gets those standards in their education throughout their PK-12 experiences. It does not go as far as what I hear you saying, which is, are we making sure that every student is assessing effectively for each of those standards by each of the grade levels, right? But there are systems in play that are doing that, and there's actually a lot of exploration that the statewide community has been doing into demonstrated competency. And so I think that there are other opportunities to look more deeply at ways that we could incentivize that if you wanted like staff to look into like what like board rule or legislative changes that would mandate that look like. But the standards writing process will not like mandate that system's in play when it's finished. Does that make sense?
Yes. And my inquiry comes from just the argument that they're like, oh, well, 33% of our kids don't know art math proficient. And my question was posed, well, what of the 100%, what did the 33% all know? And what does that mean? Because I think that changes the arguments and it changes the conversation.
Yeah.
I would much rather know what they know, what 33% know, and what 100% of our students would know. Because I mean, that shifts the whole argument.
And systems, yeah, systems that have dedicated themselves to this idea of demonstrated competency can tell you with like impressive precision what standards students have demonstrated knowledge associated with and what standards they still need. But there's not an expectation in 277-700 that every system does that.
But how you do the standards could start fostering more without them having to do it all the same way. This is helpful just as we continue to, we have not drafted a word yet. So I'm just trying to think through even the structure of standards might need to be a little different. And this group honestly is ready to like be the pushers of the new future of standards. So we appreciate you being supportive of pushing.
Cool. Thank you.
So, yeah, sure, but we have 3 items and all 3 items said that they could move to August, correct? And so we could do those next time. And that was a great conversation though, to have. I could call a that's like fulfilling to me personally, so thank you. But that would be it, so.
I think that would be great. We appreciate those that are so understanding that we just couldn't get through everything today. We did start earlier.
We did start earlier.
And that probably would be how much of standards got bumped to the next meeting versus how much of our meeting yesterday got bumped.
Great.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, Jerry. Do you need to make a motion to close? Yes. I don't know if we do.
Finish?
Finish, okay, we've got a motion to finish. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.